everyone, welcome to another amazing episode of RGDS, your retro gaming discussion show, where we talk about all things retro and video games. It's your host, Paul Driscoll, aka The Drisk, and joining me is my usual podcast partner. Yes, it's Gordon King, aka Kiggy. How are you, matey?
Hello, Drisky. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Just living the dream as we all are at the moment, but yeah, all good here.
Ah, fantastic. So in today's show, we thought we would continue our journey of the developer and publisher Gremlin. Obviously, in the first show was covering the 8-bit era. Now we're coming to the 16-bit era, and we will do another show covering the post 16-bit era, the 32-bit era, etc. And it just shows you what a wonderful developer Gremlin is.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee in all three of these eras, just top quality games. Absolute top quality games. But before we go into the main show itself, I thought it'd be fun to catch up, because I think we've been doing quite a bit, haven't we, really? So, Kingy, do you want to say what you've been up to, matey?
Yeah, well, a number of things. This one, obviously, because a lot of the Gremlin games we're going to discuss here were predominantly on the Amiga, at least for you and I. I goes, right, I'll get my, I always play on the Raspberry Pi with Pi Amiga, because I just enjoy that, and I've got all the WSD load things on it, so it's just a great way to play it. Could I find that bloody HDMI lead? That really hacked me off, right? Because the Raspberry Pi 4, unlike the 3, has a micro HDMI output, you see. And I searched bloody everywhere, mate. And it's one of these things, it's like, we're blokes, so we've got boxes of leads, of charging leads from 19 Oatcake and spare computer cables and whatnot. But it's not going to be in those boxes. But you look in silly places, don't you? Because I remember everything else was together, the power adapter, the joypad I used for it, everything's there. Not that. Hunted high and low, couldn't find it. So in the end, I just had to resort to buying another one off Amazon. So I was going through cold turkey, it's like, because my mind was on it, I wanted to play these games, I was getting quite excited about it, and just, for goodness sake. So anyway, in the meantime, between the waiting on the lead arriving, all one day on Amazon Prime, what a world we live in. One day too long, if you ask me. The future's instant Amazon, you order and it comes now. That's what we want, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I've just been playing some Spectrum games, to be honest. One of them that really stood out for me is, remember that TCQ game we played and you quite enjoyed, that very sort of artistically...
Yeah.
The author of that's released a new game called Bruxelico, and he's obviously Brazilian, and it's great that Spectrum had a popularity, and especially in the sort of Portuguese speaking countries. It's strange how a computer system that was predominantly a UK thing can just go to various places. Okay, they had all the kind of clones, and it was easy and cheap affordable components, I suppose, to make Z80 like clones that would work with the Spectrum games. But this new game is absolutely fantastic. It's all based on folklore tales in that area, so it's very cultural, which is I think it's quite a nice thing. We've got our very much, you play a lot of Spectrum games, a lot of them are UK centric, British life, you imagine like School Days or Everyone's a Wally and things like that, but to capture a snapshot of cultural beliefs elsewhere, I think it's quite educational in that way. But what another fantastic game. It's a bit of a platform beat 'em up, where you play this sort of oxen ghost thing, where you've spawned out this bottomless well. All the sort of hate of mankind is manifested and spewed out all demons, and he's like the runt of the litter, so to speak. So the demons picking him, so that's it, you're going back down the well, and there's boss fights to fight the demi-demons, and it uses all the colours. It doesn't care about colour clash, but it's done right. The music's brilliant. 5 different 128K tunes in it. A vast game, but what they've done with it as well, and I'll put this all in the show notes. Now, it's going to be a bit costly.
Yeah, please do, because I want to play this.
It's costly to buy it as a tenner, right? But what they've done as well is he's published an illustrated book along with it, with ZX art on it, and a whole backstory to read along. But on top of that, in the same way as Deus Ex Machina was done, or Machina, however we want to pronounce it, there is an audio narrated book to play along with the game as well.
Ooh.
Which is very clever, albeit
nice Is it in Brazil? Is it in Portuguese?
No, it is in English. But will be for anybody in Portuguese. There's a translation as well, so he says it in both. So obviously, we have him being Brazilian, his accent's strong, narrating English, but that's fine. Yeah. We're living an international world, and his flair and his passion for reading the tale is absolutely excellent. So what a brilliantly packaged and well presented game. And this is a modern day software house for the Spectrum. I'm telling you, keep an eye on these guys, because the previous work's been excellent.
Well, I love the last one, the one we covered on our show.
Yeah, awesome. And you'll notice very similar styles and some elements that has made its way across it. Each level you're on isn't just a left to right scroller. There's some you're on an elevator and maybe baddies are coming down at you, so you have to defend being on the elevator as it's moving up, and then it could be a moving train like platform one way, or it's just really clever, very varied. There's 3 sides to it if it was a cassette, right? Basically, part 1, part 2 and part 3, that's how big the game is. I played it all in one sitting. I had to. I was compelled, and it was excellent. Really satisfying game. So I'll put that in the show notes anyway, and I'll point you towards it.
Oh, that's awesome. The other thing that you just mentioned in our Discord channel before, I haven't got it open at the moment, but there's an Amiga event, isn't there?
That's right, yeah.
1st and 2nd of July. Is it in Nottingham?
In Nottingham, yeah. It's the Meadow Lane football ground, and it's, most of the listeners know Ravi from the Retro Hour podcast. He's the one organising this event, so you can go to the website. We'll put that in the show notes as well, theamigashow.com. It gives you the full information on it. But there's lots of guest speakers. I mean, John Hare, Sensible Software, Mike Daly from DMA, Simon Phipps of Core, and even Mev Dink is coming. So that's quite, we're going to see David Pleasance from Commodore there. I mean, there's who's who, and there's going to be live DJ events, obviously, playing sort of Amiga music and whatnot else. So I think it'll be a good 2-day event at the place.
I know, I'm so gutted, because I was like all excited when I'd heard about this a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh, I'm going, everything, definitely with that kind of lineup.
Yeah.
And obviously Ravi's a lovely guy. And,
yes.
And that, and then the wife said, you're blooming well not going, because we've got a wedding to go to.
Who gets married these days?
I know.
Get them told. Says us married men.
Yeah. I was like, you're not getting out of it. Okay.
Buggeration. It looks like a really good event. At least
it does. It looks like. I mean, I've wanted like these Amiga events like local, because usually they're all in Germany and places. So
that's right.
Absolutely gutted, because I want to like help support things like this, because I want more to happen, and he's I can only imagine the amount of effort involved.
I can imagine he's stressed out when you are it's not just an attendee or you have a small role to play in it. He's having to make sure all the cogs are in place for this to kick off, the meeting with the venue, even just putting all the information on the website about rail network links and whatnot else. It's a logistical headache, to be honest.
Yeah. So kudos to the Retro Hour podcast and Ravi. It's great. It's one of the things you realise when you look at other countries, a lot of other countries, how lucky we are with how well retro is supported. With lots of events and things. It's nice. We're lucky.
We're lucky that way. Very lucky, and albeit we may moan it's a fair trek to these events, but we still live in a relatively small island nation, right? Where, even London from Edinburgh is doable by train. It's sometimes it's the costs that can be a bit prohibitive in this country rather than the actual time.
It's blimmin' train costs are ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm gutted that I can't personally go, but I urge anybody that's where Nottingham isn't too far and you love your Amiga, this looks really special.
Yeah.
With the lineup.
And these talks are always good if you get the right guests that you're in. I mean, all talks are interesting. Everybody has a story to tell, but it's very personal to you if you're a admirer of these people's work. then of course you want to hear the Q&A sessions with them and just anecdotes that come from them, because it's part of the preservation, isn't it?
Yeah, and to our listeners, you know, when we like bandy these names about, you know, because you might not know, like John Hare is obviously Sensible Software, and you know, Sensible Soccer and Cannon Fodder. Simon Phipps, we'll be talking about some of his games today, but of course he did Rick Dangerous and Switchblade,
Bubba and Sticks.
Wolfchild, one of your
Of course,
favourites.
love Wolfchild,
Yeah. So you know, these are great guys, and of course David Pleasance basically ran the Amiga Europe division. So obviously he's a big deal as well. I can't remember the others, but because I've only briefly looked, because they hadn't been confirmed when I'd first saw the details.
Yeah, there's lots of other kind of traders and vendors going to be there. So the Amiga Addict's going to be there. So our chum Paul Monaghan undoubtedly will be there for that. I think who else? Amiga Kit, Checkmate, you know, Pure Amiga, Retro Passion, all these kind of things. And there'll be shops and vendors, you know, the usual retro sellers and such like there. So it'll be interesting to see what. And it'll be interesting, a predominantly Amiga event, what kind of vendors fully will be there. You know, do you want to see people selling SNES cartridges or Mega Drive games, or just want to see solely Amiga things for sale?
I know, and that's awesome to me. I mean, I really want to go, but I can't. It's not fair. Anyway, so I mean, other things I've been doing quite a lot actually. I've finally released that free digital book.
You did?
On James Bond. So obviously we did that podcast where we covered, like, you know, in celebration of James Bond being 70 years since he was first introduced to the world.
Incredible.
Which is crazy. Yeah, so on the back of it, we did a quite a popular and fun podcast with me covering like every James Bond game. Yeah. And on the back of it, because because there was quite a delay, and I had a real amount of time to sort of like play with these games and also do loads and loads of research, I thought what started off, I'll do like a little booklet to accompany it. But me being me, I ended up writing a 500 plus, I think it was 540.
You're a madman.
Yeah, book covering every single game, even the ones that we didn't cover, because of time. Yeah. And it's been quite popular. It's been good, because obviously not just the retro community, but there's been quite a lot of excitement in the James Bond fan community as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So that's been quite good, and I'm quite looking forward to actually. I've printed it off by Lulu. If it prints off okay, I'll share the link. Obviously, it's absolutely at cost. But I was quite impressed. Like, for over 500 pages, I found a voucher gave like something like 5% off, but it came to 20 quid. I thought that was pretty good.
That's decent for a self-printed book like that, just for yourself.
Yeah, just for myself.
It would cost that anyway if you were. I mean.
Yeah, if you went to a bookshop, you would pay more than that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, small batch production is a lot more expensive, and I mean, whether it be Bitmap Books or any other, you know, modern day retro publisher, that's what it costs.
As I say, I'll if it comes out all right. I mean, they're still printing it. Yeah. But if it comes out all right, obviously I'll share the link. It is purely at cost. I'm not making anything off this. But and likewise, on the links, I'll put in the podcast notes. You've got obviously the digital copies that you can read. But also you've got the digital copies you can read, but also there's a high quality version, which is the one that I used to print the book. So if you wanted to go to your own printing platform or whatever and do it yourself, by all means, you know, this was a labour of love done for everybody. And I also want to thank in particularly our listener Turnbull. Yep. I won't give his real name in case he doesn't like to give his real name, but that's his, like, you know, online persona name, because I mean he tirelessly proofread the book for me, and he found so many errors and and was very, very patient and really made it shine. I mean, I think it's like the best written thing in terms of like being quality proofread that I've ever done.
Good
So
for you.
I was really pleased with that.
Top stuff.
And also Deadlock, I want to thank our listener Deadlock. Of course, he does the catalogue flip book of all of our shows that we do.
Yeah.
And he does for other podcasts. And I'd rather cheekily reached out to him saying, would you mind, because I was struggling with the size of the book to do a flip book. And he jumped through some hoops and did what he did, and made a flip book version of it. For those who don't know, a flip book it'd be lower quality, obviously, but it's through a web page.
Yeah.
You can actually sort of like turn the pages.
Yeah, you're not at your
Feels-
300 dots per inch now. It's probably back down to the 75 or whatever it is, but it's still very readable, the flipbook. It doesn't, for monitor quality, that's damn fine. It's just like going into Readly, same kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's. I was to say, it's perfectly readable. I mean, you might find some of the old video game, because obviously one of the reasons of its size is I sort of found all the original reviews of a lot of these games, because that's what I wanted to do. Some of them, only like I'd say probably about 1%, you might struggle in the flipbook reading it, but it was tiny. It was like only 1 or 2 in the entire book, and to be honest, it's just a really easy way for someone to read it and see if you're interested. Yeah, so beyond that, I had a nice holiday in Worthing. You had a nice holiday as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I was up in Inverness. It was lovely in a lodge in the middle of the
gorgeous.
forest, away from mankind. So yeah, that was fine for me for an extended break. It was lovely.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that because there was a friend down in Worthing, and he's got the arcade 1-up 3/4 size digital pinball table.
How was that? I meant to
It was
ask
pretty
you.
good. Yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, it's not the best screen. I mean, the trouble with arcade 1-up, if I'm being honest, you can tell they've cut corners on the hardcore elements. But I mean, visually, like the actual aesthetic, it was like a Star Wars themed one he had.
Oh, cool.
Looked brilliant. The 3/4 size was really good, and no, I had a lot of fun. I was quite impressed with that. I was quite impressed. I played it quite a bit when I was there. He also had that, which was less good, but it was nice to see the kids play it there. He's got one of those Pandora arcade sticks.
Yeah.
And my word, I don't understand, because by default you cannot change it. They've put that like smoothing smear on all the games.
Just ruins it, doesn't it?
It just ruins it, and they stretch everything by default, and you cannot change it. So everything's like in widescreen. You know, I mean, not for me, but it was nice. You know, like he's got 2 kids, like 17 and a 14-year-old, I think.
Okay.
And it was great, sort of like introducing them to like games like Pang and things like this, because they didn't really know looking at the list.
Yeah.
You know, so I was saying, what sort of games do you like? And I was introducing them to like 1944, because I thought that wouldn't stretch it out too badly, because it was designed to widescreen 1944, and it was just lovely seeing them like play the games and they're and appreciate as well. Pang, I think, has become his son, who's 7. Favourite game at the moment.
Oh wow,
Just
that's
couldn't get off it. He just absolutely adored it.
Yeah.
So that was nice. And the final thing I wanted to say, I did see the Super Mario movie there in Worthing. Loved it. Really good. Really charmful, and it's nice to see it doing well. I thought, I didn't understand the bad reviews of it. You know, by the critics. If you look at the people's reviews, they're all favourable, which tells you a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't know, like you, have you been going crazy on the on the game sales on like Switch and Xbox?
I mean, as I said, for the Switch and such like, I never buy the digital games, because once we move over to the next console, as I always do, the shop closes, and unless you've got them downloaded, it's just gone. So for me, especially indie titles, I mean, I always buy them up on Steam anyway. And to be honest, like on Steam, There's sales all the time, not the main sales, but you'll find that game in your wish list now has become discounted, and you go, right, well, I'll get it now. So, I mean, the few that I'm sure you're going to mention here, I've went and grabbed on the Steam store anyway, because they were cheap, or you can get on other reseller sites, you can get cheaper as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess you're absolutely right. I mean, I tend to only buy cheap on Switch, although I have bought that although I have pre-ordered that Advance Wars digitally, partly because I find that I don't actually, it's a sad world we live in, isn't it, where when I buy the physical release games, I've got like the physical release of the Switch, and I find I don't play them just because of the effort of going up to the shelf. Like, then you have to like fiddle around with a little cartridge, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, but yeah, no, you're absolutely right, but that's one thing I'm trying to find out. In fact, if there's any developers out there that can answer this question for me, because I want to buy a lot of these games, all these games that I mentioned, on the Xbox. That's what I want to do. But developers only seem to ever put it on the Switch or the PS4 or PS5. Like Sony, and I just don't understand, because you'd think logically it would, given that Microsoft own Windows, you would think that it would be the easiest thing to move across. I don't know enough about the sort of like developer, but it just seems a really strange.
I think at the time of what the Switch could handle, I think it made a real olive branch out to indie developers to make it easy to get their games onto the platform without lots of loops to jump through. Whereas Microsoft, especially on the Xbox, has really made themselves Game Pass centric. And for some of these indie developers, I don't think it's financially viable for them, because they'll not get the same kind of deal as a big AAA title would be, So it's a bit like the Spotify thing, I find. And the big artists, it's all right for your Miley Cyrus's or your Metallicas or whoever. They've got the power to negotiate their streaming fee anyway, but they get 1 billion downloads, and therefore if it's based on revenue, how many people have grabbed it that way, and if it's not on the front page, it's also about the algorithm for exposure of the game. Yeah,
there must not be the sales and people turn away.
Yeah.
But it's such a shame, because I'm like you, is that I don't even trust Sony, if I'm honest, for digital sales.
No, I don't use any. I mean, I'm just digital sales fully. I've just stuck with the weapon of choice, which will always be the PC and Steam. I mean, it's even like on Epic. It's like, every time there's a free game, all you do is you inverted commas, click it, buy it, and then close Epic down again and don't bloody play the thing.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
But just a quick shout out. Some of these might still be on the sale, but I just quickly mention some of the highlights. I've bought loads of them. But the first one, so these are the ones on Switch. They're probably on PS4 and 5 as well, and probably on Steam. So Arietta of Spirits.
Yep, awesome.
Awesome game. I've really got into it. It's basically a bit like Legend of Zelda, The Link to the Past. It's got a beautiful 2D, similar but beautiful art style, and it's quite a heartfelt story where you basically find you have a special ability to connect to a spirit animal, and you go around sort of like killing like sort of demons. They're sort of like bad spirits. But it's a nice story, beautiful art style, and I like it. When I bought it, it was only like a couple of quid. It's just crazy, the prices. Yeah.
Before you move on then, have you ever tried Blossom Tales? There's 1 and 2 out on the Switch now, which is very similar. Check them out.
No, I might try those out. Yeah,
really good.
It's just finding time, isn't it, with all these games? Even the ones I bought, I'm just like thinking, when am I going to have time?
Yeah, the digital cellophane hasn't even been unwrapped on some of them, has it?
Yeah, I know. Another one that I want to mention is Kaze, the Wild Mask. You can get that pretty much anywhere. But again, I got it in the sale. Such a love letter to the 16-bit 90s platformer.
Yeah, not enough of these. I do like when they come out. I mean, there's ones like Hat in Time and whatnot, and your ukulele, and they're all great. I'm still a sucker for that style of game. I do miss it.
and it's really good. I mean, it plays, you know, if you love your Sonics and things like that, it's very reminiscent of that era.
Yeah.
Really, really good. 8 Dragons, that's been on my wish list for a while. In fact, I met the developers at one of the retro events that we did. And for shame, I never actually picked it up because it just, you know, I kept on planning to, but never getting round to it. And it's nice owning it on the Switch. I might own it on the Steam actually already, but for my shame, I've not really played it. But for those who don't know, 8 Dragons is basically a Renegade love letter. Very similar pixelated graphics.
Yeah.
Brings a lot to mind of games like Target Renegade and things. Partly because it's that more zoomed out view.
Yeah.
Just really solid beat 'em up, really, really, really nice. And of course, one of the nice things you can play with lots and lots of players. I assume 8 it can go up to.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of cool.
It's quite chaotic then when you do that, yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously, I'll probably never get a chance for that, but I was quite impressed with it. And the last one, the last 2 on Switch was Tamuki Justice, which Tamuki Justice is amazingly done on that, you know, that click tool, I think it's done on. Click Play developer tool. And that's such a good, fast arcade, sort of scrolling... I don't know how to describe it. A bit like a cute version of Shinobi type thing. Really, really good. You're just sort of like you're a Tanuki, you know, the one that Mario dresses up as.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like a raccoon, and then you just basically take everybody out. It's really difficult, really frantic, really good arcade one. The last one on the Switch, just to mention, is Picross S, which is like Mega Drive. It's like the Sega Mega Drive and Master System edition. Right. So, have you ever played Picross?
Yeah, love it. It's great. I've variants on the DS.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Well,
very addictive.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know, with Picross, it's a bit like
Sudoku in a way.
Yeah, or Minesweeper.
Yeah.
So basically, there's the logic of like it will tell you how many squares to fill in on a row or column, and then therefore using logic you work out where all the squares are filled. But what this does, which is a nice little addition, not only is it a really solid and really big game, but all the pictures are Sega game sprites, and it's got cool. like all the Sega music in the background. So you've got like, you know, Outrun playing and many of the classics playing in the background. So it just adds that extra element. So that's really, really good.
Excellent. Yeah.
And the last 3, I promise, I know it's a lot here. On the Xbox, I picked up Blast Brigade versus Evil. Absolutely amazing. It's like a twin stick platform shooter. So you're using one stick to aim as you run through. I kind of explored it because it was it's a spy theme game. You're basically a spy, but really, really good. I didn't mention it in my book at the end when I talked about other games because I hadn't really played it enough at that point. But it's a really solid platform. To give our listeners an idea, when Charlie, my mate, came round, he got totally addicted to it the whole day he was there. And promptly went home and bought it, and that was a full price. He bought it as well. Yeah. So that's good.
I don't take to the graphics as much on that one because it is all more.
It is, yeah. I was a little bit put out with the graphics. But
I'm more into pixels than vector art.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way, and that initially put me off. But gameplay wise, it's really, really solid.
Yeah.
And the other one I've been playing, which you can usually pick up regularly, very, very cheap, is the No Kuni remaster, which is like I don't normally try these sort of games because it's that sort of Final Fantasy style RPG, and I never quite get because you just like hit attack. I never seem to work out the strategy of it because you know. Defend seems a wasted opportunity. You might as well just keep hitting attack.
Yeah, I mean, that's equivalent to the brake button in a racing game, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but it's really charmful game, and I notice it's both that and the sequels on Game Pass, which is absolutely stunning, really, isn't it? Game Pass.
Yeah. I mean, especially for games that you might not necessarily buy, it's a good opportunity to, dip your toes into different genres just to, oh right, I actually do like this, and give it some time, because the Octopath Traveler games are exceptional. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're really making a clear effort to get loads of these Japanese RPGs onto the Xbox, which is wonderful. I mean, it's not really a genre I normally go towards. I prefer action RPGs, more like your Zelda.
Mm-hmm.
But
I used to be such a sucker for this genre, and I've moved away from it. It's time, because it requires you to dedicate a lot of, there's a lot of reading or listening, thought, into the strategies of the battles. Random encounters can piss you off. As usual when you're walking on the world map.
Yeah,
all of a sudden there's a random encounter, and you just sigh. It's like, oh, I've just fought someone, I'm having to fight them again. It's like going down my local bloody high street, and that's why I don't go there.
Yeah, no, I find it's I mean, for me, it's just the fundamental like game loop, if you like.
Yeah,
there's lots of talking, which is fine and things. This helps because it's done by that Studio Ghibli house, so it's that famous like anime house.
Yeah,
there's a lot of the cutscenes and stuff, which like makes, at least it looks gorgeous where you're watching.
Yeah.
But I find, as I say, just hitting that attack button, I don't quite get the excitement. But this one, for whatever reason, has really gelled with me.
Good.
Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to mention, I got loads on Steam as well. But I suppose actually one I will mention, The Spy Shot Me, was a couple of quid. It might still be there. That's like a love letter to GoldenEye.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as good. The level design, I went through a number of levels. It's not as good as GoldenEye or even the Goldfinger that we played, the fan remake.
Yeah.
But it's for a couple of quid, and it is solid. It's solid enough. It's enjoyable enough. Mm-hmm. So they're great ones. But basically, I'm a spoiled boy, and I've got far too many games to play, and I really ought to spend more time playing them. Anyway, that's enough jibber jabber. Should we go on to the main show itself then?
Yeah, I thought there was a main show, mate.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. Just a lot to talk about.
Yeah, as always.
And I wanted to talk about these indie games because there's no, often they slip through the net.
Well, it's relevant because it's people still creating games in the spirit and mindset of how we enjoy games, but just with more modern technology, and it's still games I gravitate towards. I get more out of a good indie game than I do a standard AAA.
I'm the same way. Yeah. I don't even look to a lot of the AAAs. They just leave me cold. Yeah. Actually, one thing just to briefly mention regarding that is the Wave Studio, who did Xenocrisis.
Oh, Xenocrisis, yeah, okay.
Wave Studio, so UK studio that did Xenocrisis and a few others. They've recently partnered and released a digital and physical new magazine exclusively on indie games. It's called Debug.
Yes. Seen that, yeah.
Yeah, I picked up digitally. So digitally it was £3 and £7 for the physical. I probably will pick up the physical.
Yeah, but that's a good digital price, so that's pretty decent.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good, and it's very, very good because it doesn't just review the games; it talks to the developers and things. But I've wanted that for a long, long time because that's the biggest problem I have. Although there's some great YouTubers that highlight a lot of these games like Switch Corner and Radical Reggie and people. And that's how I discover a lot of these indie games. Because that's the trouble, you're right. There's nothing on the shop front to find these games. You just wouldn't find them unless you're like either browse an entire catalogue.
Yeah.
Things like this. So I've been crying out for an indie magazine for a long while, and I just hope it's a success for the guys.
I hope so too.
Yeah. We'll put in the show note the link to the place.
Yeah.
Anyway, now on to the main show. Right. Okay. So obviously in the last episode we talked about the 8-bit era, and that's where from small beginnings in a small computer shop in Sheffield. Gremlin had sort of built up their gaming empire. They really made a name for themselves, didn't they, through all the games we covered, like, Monty Mole and Jack the Nipper and all these wonderful games in the 8-bit era.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's great about Gremlin, unlike a lot of the 8-bit developers that struggled perhaps each transition, in many ways Gremlin seemed to get stronger and stronger, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the 16-bit era that we're about to cover, I suppose for the age that I am, I probably have more of affinity to this era, because that was like my main game, my teenage years of gameplay.
Yeah.
Still have a lot of memories, obviously, of the 8-bit as well. But, these are the ones that really, really impressed me. And we were talking, weren't we, beforehand,
mm-hmm.
When you realise the games that Gremlin released in this period,
mm-hmm.
What a large part of the Amiga library it
Huge,
was.
massive.
Huge. I mean, a lot of our listeners' favourite games on the Amiga probably came from Gremlin, or the spin-off that we'll mention of Core Design, obviously, because Core Design was, they basically broke off, they closed down an office, sadly, in Derby, but they were Gremlin before.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go. Well, first of all, Kingy, what memories do you have of this period?
There's so many. I mean, it was an exciting time with the Amiga, because for some of the games, there was that transitional thing where there was some 8-bit versions of the games we're going to speak about as well. You know what I mean, right? And some of my exposure, because I was defiant, I was holding on to my Spectrum to, 1990, the bitter end almost, just loving it. And just my wages wouldn't quite cover the Amiga, so I was lucky that my brother, had his Amiga, and we spent so much time playing it together, with him going out before I bought the Amiga from him when he upgraded to a PC. It was always in the house anyway, and if he was out, clubbing or whatever, because he was 5 years older than myself, I had this computer to myself, and the vast majority of these games were played in this period, and they were just, to me, just such quality. For me, I remember my mates seeing it, and there's maybe a Mega Drive version, or, that they'd like the game and go buy it for them, and it would never work for me, because the sound chip was so different. I just loved the dreamy Amiga music in a lot of these games, and playing them back again, it was hugely nostalgic. It certainly took me to a different part in my life, because I'm talking, I've left school by this point, and I'm working myself, so this is my young adult years. This is what this represents. And yeah, looking at the list, as we said, it's like, yep, I had such great fun with this game, that game, invested hours upon hours in a lot of them. There's a few new to me that I didn't know existed. That's fine, that's what it's about as well. But it showed just how strong a software house Gremlin was. Of course, it went on to the 32-bit era, so it saw this period through as well. So yeah, many happy memories with this software house with the Amiga.
Yeah, no, same with me, really. I mean, the Amiga, it took me years to save up for the Amiga.
Remind me again, what year did you actually get your Amiga?
It was 91.
Yeah.
Like Easter 91.
So yeah, we're talking about the same time as I got. It came into my world as well, round about that time, because we had the Atari ST first, which we played many games on as well, a bit prior, and they moved up to that. Yeah,
so, I think it was like 2 years prior, maybe 3 years prior, actually. It was before the Batman pack, so that was like 89, wasn't it? So, yeah, it was probably about 88 I first saw an Amiga around a friend's house. Absolutely fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. And loved it enough and played it enough that I basically saved up. My parents did put some money at the end, thankfully, because it's a lot of money. It was like £399 when I got it. But yeah, it was a lot of effort to get it. But my word, I'm so glad I did, with the Amiga. Because it was great. I mean, one of the things I even knew as a kid, I know perhaps developers wouldn't want to hear this and publishers, but I knew that it was relatively easy to get the game. So once you bought the device,
Yeah.
it was a lot cheaper. You know, it wouldn't be like the SNES and Mega Drive where, yes, it was cheaper to buy the machine, and in many ways games were more polished.
Yeah.
But you'd probably only be able to buy 1 or 2 games a year.
Correct.
Because they're really, really expensive. So yeah, so that was a big factor. And yeah, I've such fond memories of Gremlin. I mean, some of my favourite, all-time favourite games on the
For
Amiga
sure. Yeah.
is it was done by Gremlin. And the others done by Core, which, you know, well, I hope we do an episode on Core.
I think we're long overdue that, aren't we? I think we need
Yeah.
to look at that at some point down the line.
Because that's another real favourite of mine.
Yeah.
So what I thought we'd do, we're covering a lot of games here, so like on previous episodes, well, we always say this and it never works out that way.
We're not going into depth.
Yeah, we're not going into depth, because a lot of these games we have covered before
Yeah.
in other podcasts, but we will, you know, give each a reasonable shine time, and I'm sure it's the same for you. You know, we played all these games because that's really important for the show. Yeah, so let's start with the first game. And I thought we'd go chronologically, mixes it up nicely, and it gives a good feeling of how they developed as a publishing house, and the developers they brought on. So the first game, I actually prefer the sequel. I came to the sequel first, but this one is one that I have a lot of time for, and that is Switchblade. Now, this came out in December 1989, so it was after, or around about the same time, Simon Phipps also released and worked on the Rick Dangerous games. And if you played the Rick Dangerous games, you'll see a lot of similarities in the visual style. He's got great graphic style. But what is Switchblade? It's basically a platformer with an attack move. Amazing music. It's got really cute little character called Hero. Looks very much like that squashed effect of Rick Dangerous. If you, to our listeners, you've probably played that. And it's really an exploration game, isn't it? Where you go room to room, there's secret tunnels, you have to take out the enemy guys, and you just work your way through an underground complex for a large part of it, although you start on above ground on the planet. What's your thoughts of this game?
Yeah, I mean, when we covered this prior, I was a bit like you, and we were more champions the sequel, weren't we? And I think it was slightly because my opinion of this was slightly marred by having the Spectrum version first, which is still okay, but monochromatic and a bit messy. But given this enough time and going back to it, I fell in love with this all over again. It is a damn good game. One of the things I really like about it is you don't see the whole screen when you enter a room, right? It's segmented off. So it was influenced by Steve Turner's Ranorama, which done exactly the same thing, and that's where Steve Phipps really liked that effect and wanted to add this onto the game. So you maybe walk past a wall and that section of the room lit up and you seen what was in it, and that really appeals to my wanderlust in games. Oh, I wonder what is up there. The game encourages you to go into every nook and cranny. There's false walls. You think you've hit a dead end. Is it shit? Wherever it goes. So you've got to test and punch everything just to see where to go. I think its only failing is that in terms of the tile sets in the game, it's a bit samey, isn't it? You know, the grey tiles in the background, ladders and levels, but that doesn't detract from it being quite a bloody good game.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That's one of the notes I'd made, is because although the graphics are really, really nice, there's no real variety. The whole game, and I played it all the way through, is that same grey complex. You're all in the single complex. The only variety is above ground, but that's right at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
I'm like you, actually. I was quite dismissive of this before the show, like before we did the podcast, purely because the first game I discovered was the sequel, and I still prefer that, I'm not gonna lie, but consequently it was a bit of a shock back in the day, and when I sort of played this, because it's like, oh, it's totally a different game, really. I know Simon Phipps was not a fan of the sequel.
No.
Because he had no involvement in the sequel. Just so by that time he'd got moved on to Core, so it was a totally different development team that worked on this. But yeah, for this I had a lot of fun. The only thing I didn't like is it's quite clunky. You basically have a power up, so you to do a kick or a punch, which sometimes you pick up a weapon, which makes it a lot easier. But for the vast majority of the time, you because you'll quickly run out of the weapons, you're doing a kick or a punch. It's all based on you hold down the fire button and you can see a power bar go up. And you have to basically, to have it as a full power bar to take out the enemies. If you can do some quick punches, but you'll take a lot of hits. And that's the only frustration I had with it. I mean, you do get used to it, but it felt unnecessary in a lot of ways. But beyond that, I mean, the music is phenomenal.
It is, isn't it?
I love it. You know, it's great. Ben Dalglish did the music, and Simon Phipps basically did everything else: the design, the graphics. I was really glad that we covered this, because it's one that I never really go to. I always go to the sequel. That's one that I love enough. It's one of the ones I truly love. I've bought physical copies of over the years, and Switchblade 2 is one of the ones I've always picked up for that very reason. But to have a physical copy. But I might pick up the first one, because I'm starting to love this one.
Yeah,
really,
but you have to give it its dues as well. This was just a side project when he was finishing his 9-to-5 job working on Rick Dangerous, right? He was going home and working till 1 a.m. at night just making this game. So you can see where the influences and parallels with Rick Dangerous came. So really this was just a freebie created in his own time. It just showed the love of his craft that he had making games. And if you take that in mindset, where he's probably mentally knackered for working on code and trying to get the elements of Rick Dangerous right, and then hard day at the office. There's the last thing you want. What it's like. There's days where you've been online all day and you've been in Teams meetings. The last thing you want to do is even go on your computer and game once you've finished working, is it?
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, it just shows his love. I've always had a lot. I've never had the opportunity to meet him in person. Unfortunately, I probably won't, because can't go to that.
Is the wedding not in Nottingham, though?
No. I've got to work out a way. Maybe I could send get someone to attach a phone to their head.
Yeah, you can always travel up on the Sunday and go one day of the event.
Well, I'm on a. Oh, I don't know.
We're digressing.
We're digressing.
We'll plot later.
Lamenting and digressing. Yeah. I really like this game, and Simon Phipps always struck me as a lovely individual, and like every game that he did, you could see the love and care that he put into it. I don't know, actually, I didn't have time to check on his website, which the website's fantastic, by the way, because it gives a lot of history and memories of all the games. But he did have on there, hopefully it's still there, a 3D cutout that you can print off of Hero and Rick Dangerous. You can like, make a 3D model of the little characters, which I thought was a cute touch. But I'm glad. So was this new to you? You said you played it before on the Spectrum, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, and I've played it. I've played it on the Amiga over the years, so yeah, it's a game I'm strongly familiar with.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, it was a really, really strong across the board. The reviews of this were pretty much up, and so many were in their 80s or even 90s.
Yeah.
Everybody loved it, and I have to say, actually, I probably prefer this. As much as I love Rick Dangerous, I probably prefer it to Rick Dangerous, because Rick Dangerous is just so...
Not as forgiving, is it?
Not as forgiving. It's got so many like insta-deaths.
There's too many... Rick Dangerous
traps.
is much more of a memory game.
Well, this is exploration, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what adds to the excitement. Don't get me wrong, Rick Dangerous is still such a cool game. But yeah, this is a decent one to start off with. And of course, he didn't even develop it for them. He wrote it at home on ST.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I don't like that, do you?
You can't hold that against him, I guess. Oh, no. It's basically identical, isn't it, on the... it came out on a variety of ones. I noticed Jaguar, there's it's been recently ported to the Jaguar.
Ah, that's cool.
Which is quite cool, like in 2017, and the Mega Drive also has been ported. I don't know if it's still there. They also have it. I noticed Antstream apparently has it as well, which is
all right.
Yeah, great one to start with. Yeah, I'll be honest. As much as I love the idea and all the love and care, I just fundamentally with Antstream, the fact that it's all cloud-based gaming just doesn't work for me. I just wish they'd change their model, because everything else I love.
Yeah.
I just there's too many glitches to make it playable. Anyway, right, okay, so should we go on to the next game?
Yes, please.
So this is another absolute classic. It is, of course, Turbo Lotus Esprit. This was, of course, published by Gremlin. It was done by long-time collaborators and developing house for Gremlin called Magnetic Fields. Of course, so many games they did. Some of the ones we'll be covering, like Supercars and, of course, the sequels to the Lotus trilogy. But they also did games like Kid Chaos and Network Q Rally and Mobile One Rally Championship going into the later era. Of course, Sean Southern and Andrew Morris. Sean Southern did the programming. We even talked about them in the last episode on the C64. They were very prolific. Yeah. And Andrew Morris did the graphics, with Sean Southern actually doing the music to the original, which shows what a talented individual, because I really like the first game's music. I think
we discussed that in depth when we done our Evolution of Racers and really went into that, didn't we? And just thought, as much as, sort of later on racing games having, what's his name to do the music?
Barry Leach.
Barry Leach, why did his name escape me there?
But this was Sean Southern in the first one.
Yes, that's right, and there's something really special about it. It's his musicians' music is like a signature. You recognise it, whether it be Tim Follin or whoever, or Jerome Tell. You recognise their music, and I think on this, it's very characteristic of his style, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so obviously Turbo Lotus, I mean, this came out in 1990, so it was nice.
Yeah.
You know, right at the point when the Amiga was really exploding. You just had the Batman pack. Loads of people bought it with the Amiga. Obviously, it came out on the Atari ST, and it also had 8-bit ports like on the Spectrum and Commodore 64 and Amstrad as well. I probably needs no introduction to our listeners, but in case you perhaps don't come from a home computing UK background like some of our American listeners, it's basically what the console owners eventually saw as Top Gear series. It was like the beginning of that idea, although they were done by a different development house. We will come to those. But it's a from behind outrun style racer, but it's more based on tracks. You're racing tracks. You're obviously driving a single car, the Turbo Lotus Esprit, which is a great Lotus car, and just going a whole range of locations. And you just basically have to beat 7 tracks, don't you? You have to qualify and make your way through. It's got all the usual sort of like settings like automatic and manual and all the good stuff like that. Different music on each. You can select from a radio at the beginning. Yeah, I mean this was. I mean one of the big things to mention. It was multiplayer, so you could play 2-player at the same time, which was such a big deal in 1990. One of the sad things, which is a little difficult to get used to when you played the sequels, is it's always in half screen. So if you play the first just single player, you basically only see the top half of the screen, and the other is admittedly rather cool in the pit stop, isn't it, with people working on the car.
Mechanics working on the car, that's right.
The car. I mean, what's your memories of this one?
Absolutely. This was phenomenal back in the time, simply because there was a thirst for getting the scalar racers, if you wanted to call it that, onto your home computers. Now, up to that point on the 8-bit era prior to this, there was some noble and excellent attempts at trying to replicate that. Obviously, Chase HQ being probably the best example in the spectrum, but you had your power drifts, you had your outrun, you had your Wick Le Mans, all that kind of thing. So we were exposed to it, but that was a very, very limited hardware, wasn't it? You were having an interpretation of the arcade experience back then. But when this came out, I think you just went to say, oh shit, has got real. We have that kind of outrun vibe in a game at home with all the, the dips and the peaks in the race, so the horizon vanishes and down again, the exhilarating sensation of speed, all the trees, road signs, boulders whizzing by, all that. It was just excellent. And you didn't mind when you got the first one that was locked to the top. You didn't think about that at the time at all.
It's amazing how quickly your mind gets used to it, even going back to it.
Yes.
I was quite fine with it, really, because you're just I mean, it's going so quickly. Your mind just concentrates. In some ways, it's good not to see that much of the screen because you can just
you're distracted. That's right. It's fine, and I get why it was made like that, and that's fine. And it was just an exceptional game to have at the time. And even, well, you're on about the obviously added the Lotus in. They were about halfway through writing just a racing game when Gremlin themselves, the powers that be behind the scenes, had acquired the rights to use Lotus within the game. So that's when they came to the team. How would you feel about adding the Lotus thing? And I think that made it a bit more identifiable. It wasn't then supercars, was it, or anything like that. We just made up kind of vehicles. It had a cool license attached to it, and I think that's what made it a bit more prominent in the public eye and made it a more successful game, if you ask me.
No, definitely. And then this was like, for reviews, it just blew everybody away. I mean, I remember I mean, it's difficult for people that perhaps weren't on our gaming journey of the Amiga, but there were so many disappointments in the early days of the Amiga, where you know, Outrun was an abomination on the Amiga. Chase HQ was quite a disappointment. You know, only really in the early days of the Amiga, Super Hang-On was quite impressive
on mouse,
but you know, the vast majority were just like, what the hell are you doing? You know, the 8-bits were actually better. So when this came along, and they just showed what could be done, and not only just showed what could be done, but did multiple player. I mean, that was just, I mean, you wouldn't even dream of that. You were just glad to have that kind of speed, but to have like a twin racer with two people racing at the same time was just great. And of course, you played it with your mates non-stop. It was one of the kind of reasons to actually buy a second joystick for your Amiga. You know, definitely.
It's interesting as well, talking about the sort of criticism. I mean, there was some wrongful, I wouldn't say it was negativity, but they were kind of saying wrongly that the reason you don't see damage or the car blowing up or crashing is because Lotus wouldn't allow it due to the licensing thing. They don't want that to happen to the product. But it's not true. It was basically simply memory limitations. They've maxed the thing out and they couldn't get any more memory for sprites for different collisions and that. So that's why you don't see that in the game.
But you know, I mean, that's the thing. I think they make the mistake with like a lot of modern racers is with arcade racing, you don't want realism. You know,
Agreed.
in fact, I would say the one bit I don't like with the game is the fuel, because you have to go in the pit stop. And that would be fine if they did what they did on later games that we'll come to, where you could pick up fuel as you race.
As you drive,
But just like pulling into a pit stop, you know, just boring. Because it's boring. You know, that's one bit I don't like. But I have to say, actually, in playing all the Lotus games, this is probably my second favourite of them, and you'll be probably surprised what is my favourite. We'll come to that when we come to it. Yeah, no, I had a lot of time, a lot of good memories, and it was great going back, and particularly this is one because there were so many on the Amiga. I plugged in my Amiga Mini, and I was just having a blast playing all these games. It was like with your Raspberry Pi. It's just nice just to do it so easily, isn't it?
That's the point. Rather than faffing with discs or different, disc images, it's just all together like that. And I've been impressed with Pi Amiga. It's really made me really fall back in love with the Amiga. And I think the only reason I've not played it as much in recent years was, as we said in the emulation episode, is it's the most faffiest emulator to. Okay, there's different varieties of them, but if we're talking about Win UAE, it can be such a ball ache at times. There's so many sub options in that, whereas this pre-made thing where you got your Mini 500, I've got my Pi Amiga, or if you're into your original hardware and you like having your your
I've got all of that
flash stuff, life has gotten easier for Amiga players whatever way you decide to play it.
Definitely. It's a great one, and also worth noting as well is there's a nice sort of like variety to the levels, isn't it, and stuff like that. Nice. Just a great game. I love you got things to slide on and things like that. So great introduction, and just shows the talent, isn't it, of these guys.
Yeah.
So shall we go on to the next game then?
We're still on cars, so yes, let's do that.
Yeah. So this is another wonderful game by Magnetic Field's team. They were really on a roll at this point. Also in 1990, they released an overhead racer this time called Supercars. Now, we have covered these in previous episodes. It's a very competent one. It's basically scrolls, so it's not like Super Sprint where it's a single screen, and you also have like weapons and things like that, isn't it? I know we've discussed in previous shows, I've always struggled a little bit with Supercars. I find it more difficult to go back to, but I do remember loving this back in the day. I mean, it's still a competent, fun race, and just shows the talent that the guys had, really. I mean, what's your memories of this one?
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I enjoyed it immensely back in the day because it was a sort of natural evolution to the super sprint top-down racers, but with the added dimension of scrolling to it. It was incredible, wasn't it? Just so much fun playing it. Yeah, this kind of thing is maybe a bit more dated nowadays. That's okay though. But I love all the sprite work and the animation. I do like a good top-down racer. You know,
you're quite a fan of them, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm quite a fan. There's modern ones out, even on Steam, that I own and still get a lot of enjoyment. I love a good top-down one where the sort of mechanics and the inertia and the steering and the drift of the car is just right. Because when you get used to that, you can really nail those tracks and get round the corners. Really enjoy. But what was that? Just as a side note, what was that 3D isometric one we were playing again on the lockdown episode?
Oh, Rock and Roll Racing.
Yeah, the same vibe, isn't it? You get the...
Yeah. I mean, I think Rock and Roll Racing is more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very basic. Does it have the feel of a PD game now when you go back to it? I think so. Yeah,
I mean, they definitely improved dramatically on the sequel.
Yeah.
Actually, the sequel was the one that added all the shooting and things, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, this was... I remember loving it at the time. It's got amazing music. You know, Ben Daglish did the music on this. As I say, you know, it's still Sean Southern and Andrew Morris. Yeah, no, I mean, it was a big deal at the time. It was reviewed really well.
Yeah, and deservedly so, to be honest, because it was so easy to be impressed. I mean, when you look back at it now, it does feel like you're racing on a very modular scale extract track, right? But going under bridges and the car disappears, I know it's easily amused back in the day, but I was like, whoa, check that out. And when you get the scoreboard...
It felt arcadey, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that's what you wanted. You're like me, you just don't want... I don't gel well with technical racers. I just rather just race and not use the brake button and just get first, and that's the end of it. Yeah, and
I like you had like these little in between sections, wasn't it, where you talk to individuals, and there's quite a lot of humour to the chatting. It's nice range of tracks, plays well enough. They definitely improved on a lot of things on the sequel. Although sometimes the shooting can annoy, because you know it's fine when you're blowing up people, but how dare they when you're like ahead and they take you out?
Yeah, for sure. But no, it's a well, considering, I mean, they come from an outrun racer and then they moved on to this. You'd expect that we want bigger, better, and this is, some people may think it's a step back, but it's just a different kind of game. Yeah, the cars are all a bit samey, but in truth, the cars are all a bit samey and Lotus Esprit as well. So, I mean...
But, it's nice they did sort of variety with things like that. Right, okay, so should we go on to the next game then?
Yes.
Right, so this is going away from cars and we're back to shoot 'em up. And this was Venus the Flytrap. Now this was like a horizontal shooting thing where you play like a mechanical fly.
Yeah.
It's not, most of the time you're walking. You can do a bit of flying. It's nice. It's got sort of that, as you build up your shot, you've got like that radius thing where you can sort of like choose your weapon along the bottom. It's got a lovely copper visual effect, so you get the background, sort of like the skyline goes from purple to like green.
Yeah,
that Amiga did so well.
Yeah, that's very... To me, it always remembers me the Amiga so much with games that did that. You have the gradient range of the hue, and it just looks gorgeous, doesn't it?
It does, and to be honest, I mean, this plays pretty well. I mean, I had fond memories of the day. I wouldn't say it's like a 90% game or anything like that. Probably a 70% game. You know, it's quite competent, and I had a lot of fun with it. I mean, I didn't play it all the way through to the end because I got a bit bored after going through several levels.
Yeah.
But it is one, particularly playing without any cheat on or anything like that, where you play it properly, you know, and you have that challenge, it becomes a lot more fun.
Yeah.
It's not one I would recommend playing with the cheat because you'll quickly get bored with it.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts of this game?
Yeah, I mean, I played it back in the day and did enjoy it. It's still above average, but I think the bit that pissed me off on it more than anything was the upside down levels. I just can't be arsed for that in any game, to be honest. It just fries your brain for starters, and it just seems counterintuitive, those levels. I don't mind it on games that it's a one-off feature and you go into the upside down world, and that's all in well, but that puts it off for me. But apart from that, yeah, as you said, the Gradius power-up thing works on it all right. That's not too bad. I mean, obviously, we think because we've covered this before, haven't we? I always forget what we cover and what we don't these days.
I think...
Because we mentioned it, obviously, it's spiritual successor, predecessor has evolved from Chrome, and he's taken what he learned from Chrome and developed it into a more fully fledged game. Yeah,
because Chrome was like a hidden game, wasn't it? And it also released on Covetous, which is where we covered it as well. Yeah. Because they put like and that basically was a very simplified version of that, where you just like a round blob, but it was very similar with the shooting. Visually, this looks really, really nice. I mean, it's got some wonderful parallax scrolling, like the cloud level where you're above the clouds. Yeah. And got all the parallax and I'm like you, I just love the Amiga copper effect where you get all that beautiful gradient of colours and really shows what the Amiga can do. And that's one thing I quite enjoy with this, is you have a lot of variety. It's one of those games where you're like, oh, I wonder what's coming next, because there's real variety to the level. But I'm like you, the so it's like you mentioned with the underground, upside down, because there's certain sections in levels as well, isn't it, where you land on something and then suddenly you switch upside down, and then of course you've got to flip your whole brain around to what is jump, because it's so opposite, obviously, and you're right. I guess it's cool because he's a mechanical fly, but gameplay wise it does frustrate because you can lose a lot of lives. But I had quite a bit of fun with this one, I have to say. I mean, I'm with you. It's not top tier Gremlin. You know, I'd probably put it at 70%. But if you love your shooters, this is a lot of fun. Yeah,
and I always chuckle because every time I hear the title Venus the Flytrap, because there was a local slapper in our pub that was called Penis the Flytrap, you know, so...
So it springs to mind.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, fantastic. No, but really, really good. And it just shows, that's one thing you can say with Gremlin, they had such variety of genres that they covered. You know, they didn't just stick to one thing.
No, that's right, and I admire it for that. And it is a worthwhile game playing if you like your kind of platform shooters, and it is very arcade-like. And I think any listeners that are into that kind of genre will get, if they haven't played it before, definitely fire it up and give it a little play, because it is worth the time.
Yeah, definitely. Right, any more you want to say about that?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Cool. Okay, so the next one, this is we've covered it a number of times because I love it so much.
And we're covering it again.
We're covering it again, and it is, of course, Hero Quest. Now, I adore Hero Quest. So, to our listeners, if you haven't listened to those episodes, or perhaps some of our American listeners, where perhaps you don't know what it is, Hero Quest was based on a Milton Bradley and Games Workshop. So Games Workshop did, like, you know, Warhammer and Warhammer 40k. They did like a simplified board game, physical board game called Hero Quest, and it was brilliant. I mean, as a kid, it's still one of my favourite board games of all time. It was just really, really nice because it was exploring and doing like fantasy, exploring the dungeons. You'd find, you know, attack a range of like goblins and monsters, but it was a really, really simplified. The rules were a lot more simplified. So
it took the core elements and commercialised it and made it approachable for, I suppose, families to play.
Yeah, exactly. Although I could never get my families to play this one.
Truth.
It was had to be the friends. But I mean, what I loved, because on the board game it was physical, like 3D models. So you're moving them around, and you know, there was magic because you had like your 4 characters, like you had barbarian, dwarf, elf, and wizard, and the elf and wizard could also do magic.
Yeah.
And there was also a continuation on where, as you found gold on one adventure, you could carry that on subsequent ventures by going to the shop in between campaigns, in between like adventures, to buy better weaponry, and that would give you more attack or more defense. So this Gremlin and the developer 221B Software Development House, they did a fantastic rendition of that game, which was such a big deal to me because I loved, as I mentioned, I loved the board game, and I bought all the extras and all of these things. I still love it to today. I mean, I bought the original Hasbro equivalent to Kickstarter. I bought the new Hero Quest as well that they did of it all. I absolutely adore it. But I could never get anybody to play. A lot of my friends locally were pretty non-geeky. They were more into football and things like that. And so it was a hard job getting them to play. There was only like one group of friends that I had locally that would even consider playing it. And then nowhere I could get my family to play it. They just weren't interested in these sort of things. So it was very seldom I actually got to play Hero Quest, or I would make my own sort of single player rules, bless me, to play it. So I was thrilled when when this game came along, because it was a really faithful rendition of that game. I mean, it didn't, apart from very simple animations as you attacked, they didn't try to go against or diverge too much against what it was, on the board game. It was just the board game in digital form. But of course, the big advantage of it is the computer played the games master, which meant you could concentrate on all the players. So obviously, and because it was turn-based, you could have all 4 players, just you controlling it. I just adore the game. It has the fantastic music by Barry Leach. It's got the wonderful graphics of Jason Wilson, who of course went on to do the medieval games, and the coder Michael Hart. What's your memories of this game?
I mean, like yourself, was a massive fan of this board game. I was lucky in the time it came out. My mates all bought it as well as myself, so we all had our own boards of it. And we went to each other's houses and was able to paint the figures. So I was very lucky that way. But it was short-lived for them. It was a fad more for them. And then they just lost interest in it. But I still wanted to play the game and fell in love with it, because there was nothing really else like it. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons was very much hugely underground, more so in the UK than it was in the States, right? It wasn't as a big thing. I mean, our exposure to Dungeons and Dragons was a fantastic cartoon, if you know what I mean, more than anything else. So to have this game that wasn't Monopoly, it wasn't Cluedo, it wasn't Tiddlywinks. And it still was complex. Just because it was simplified didn't make the nuances of the rule too simple. The point being is that even when I haul it out today, or even back then, I'm like, you always had to be the dungeon master in the game to control it, because you had to explain to people, you can't do that, you've done a move now, you've done your action, you only get one action per turn or whatnot, you know what I mean? You have to guide the game to them, so you never got to play the game as one of the players. You know, that was a shame on it. You've probably done the same as me. You were dungeon master and one of the players on the actual physical board game. It's like, well, I know what you're thinking because I'm now dungeon master, right? You know, so to then have this game come out that you can play as one of the players and allow the AI or the computer to control it for you was a breath of fresh air, and I just loved it. It's the digital replication of this game is perfect. It looks gorgeous. It still looks gorgeous today, and I would just gladly fire this up as much as rake out the board game just to get my Hero Quest fix, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you can't fault it, really. I mean, it just does everything that the board game did. And as you say, I mean, to our listeners who perhaps never played it, the physical release or this, so the video game is done in isometric. But what the games master had to do, which was a great idea, really, you know, when you played the physical release version, is when you went into went down a corridor, they would have to place. You had like where everything was on a hidden map.
Yeah,
and then when they went down a corridor, then
the line of sight appeared. Yeah,
line of sight, and you would suddenly show the doorways. And when you went in a room, you know, there'd be furniture or a monster. So it was a very clever how it was done.
Yeah.
But as you say, I mean, you wanted to be the hero, didn't you, when you played it physically, and you couldn't really be games master and the hero because you knew where everything was, and you knew the best way through.
Another added benefit of this one is, right, just say you were playing with your mates, being turn-based, so the 4 of you are playing, and you all go different routes, okay? And you go the lucky route, and it's maybe, you know, heavily guarded, which is always indicative of good treasure is this way, or hopefully it is, you know. But on the physical board game, they can see exactly where you are, so they change their direction, start moving. Yeah, they're going to reap the rewards of your death now because you've slaughtered maybe, you know, 5 of the baddies in the room. There's one left, and they're just like poachers that can go in. But in this version, they've not got an overview of the whole map. They have to remember the route they took, don't they? So that bit changes. It's a true dungeon in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can bring up the map. There is a map.
I don't allow that though. Hey, you're not going in that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love it, and I love the risk and reward. Like with the board game, you had like in any area, you can once search for treasure. And once search for traps.
That's right.
Because there could be like a hidden trap.
Or a hidden door as well.
Or a hidden door.
Yeah.
And you know, it's the risk and reward, and particularly with like treasure, because in the board game you had like a treasure card. So sometimes it could be, oh, you've found something, and it's like 50 gold coins, and like, oh, fantastic! I can use that to get a better weapon, or you know, towards getting a weapon. But equally, you could find like a roaming monster, and suddenly you've got another monster to deal with.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's just a fantastic game, and I really wish this is one that, because I know like Hasbro Pulse that did the re-release, they did application that's free to download, which is basically the companion piece, so you can play by yourself on Hero Quest. But there's just something about the graphics in this Amiga version and ST, you know, particularly the 16-bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful on all the systems. I mean, Spectrum had a wonderful port and that. I'm not sure with the Commodore 64 and CPC, but I'm sure they were equally good. But yeah, it just plays really well, and it's one that I often crank up to give a go. Yeah,
it's a great license adaptation that's done it justice. It's hard to tell if people who hadn't owned the board game bought this or not. I don't know. I'm not sure of the sales or not, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a popular board game, and it's hand in hand. Tend to be video gamers also like games of this board games of that nature anyway, you know. So, you know, I mean, well, it spawned a sequel, so obviously it got enough sales. So, and DLC pack things.
Yeah, and to Sierra lovers, it was this game and this board game was the reason that Hero Quest, the adventure game, had to change its name to Quest for Glory, because they lost the legal case of using the term Hero Quest. So that's just a little fact there. Now, love the game though.
Yeah.
Any more you want to say about that before we move on?
I'm good with that.
Right, okay, we're back to racing again, and Sean Southern and Andrew Morris, coming out in 1991, so the following year, on the Amiga and ST. Even the Genesis saw a version as well, and the Acorn 32-bit, the Archimedes, I assume. They saw Lotus 2 released, which took everything about the first game, but really improved. The biggest improvement was the fact that in single player it went to full screen.
Yeah.
And also you had lots of weather effects, which was really impressive. Like there'll be fog and rain and I think snow and things like that. It was a nice variety to the levels, and like ran blisteringly fast. Likewise, though, you could still play 2-player. It's just that it wouldn't go split. It would only go split screen when you chose 2-player.
Yeah.
This time they had, Barry Leach as well as Sean Southern doing the music, and he did that title music of Lotus 2 as like the intro kicks in. Is just awesome.
It's iconic.
I mean, it's one of the best Amiga tunes. And the other thing, here you could also drive the Lotus Elan, as well as the Turbo Esprit. The one thing that, just to mention, which I don't like about it, is it's all about checkpoint. So, unlike the first one where it was laps, on this one, it was all about time. So, you had to get to the next checkpoint before the timer ran out. And basically get through that checkpoint and then get through 7 full tracks, to sort of like complete the game. I mean, what's your thoughts of Turbo Lotus?
Oh, I mean, the amount of time I spent on this was just incredible. It was a technical leap for us to get the full screen for starters. So you're not just seeing a small mountain range or in a horizon. You've got the blue skies. You've got that Sega blue sky vibe to it, don't you, this time? Yeah, and there's a bit more graphical overhaul, and I feel that the frames per second has improved greatly in this as well. So this was the go-to one that happily played for hours, just, try to complete it, to be honest. And the music made it. The music was a companion. It was just as much as important as the technical prowess of the game. And the locations were spectacular. I love how you get that little splash screen before each level, just a little piece of pixel art showing you the next region you're racing in. The tunnel effects were brilliant. The fog. I mean, we'd moan about fog effects in later years. I mean, if you played, especially when the early years 3D games came out, the whole fog, this magic carpet. I'm not particularly pointing my finger at you. That was just for limitations, but the game proved itself. If the game opened in a fog level, you went, suspect here, but it didn't, so it's a nice touch of your visibility distance being hindered and therefore quicker reactions required, it was because the cars you would have to overtake would, come out the blue or whatever, and it's just absolutely brilliant. A great racing game on Amiga, if not up there with one of the best.
No, I mean, you're right. The variety and everything. It's just the fact that the checkpoint annoys me a little bit, because I like the fact, you know, when you're doing lap racing, that you're trying to get the position.
I understand.
Trying to get first, second, or third, and like you have a little bit of chance. Like if you have a crash in this, chances are you're probably not going to make the final.
Yeah,
checkpoint.
you start to know that.
Yeah. Whether at least, you know, with the qualifying, you know that maybe you're not going to get first, but you might get third, in which case. But I'm like you. I mean, this came at the right time. It was when I first got my Amiga, so this was the one that I actually probably played the most, because it was a new game coming out. And obviously the full screen, the speed, the music, particularly the intro music. I feel the inner music is not quite as good as some of the games, if I'm honest. But yeah, no, I do love this game. But I have to say, for me personally, and it's quite a divisive thing to think. Going back to it retrospectively, I actually probably of the three prefer this the least, because I like the intro. I like the laps and the first position,
Right.
And I like the variety and some of the things will come about the third one. But the second one, whilst I probably, like you, played it the most, going back and have all the nostalgic memories.
Yes.
The checkpoint annoys me.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's great. I know we've covered them before, but yeah, adore the Lotus. All three. I mean, don't get me wrong. All three are all-time classics. It's just down to preference.
Yeah.
Any more you want to say about that one? I know we've covered it lots of
Yeah, I
times in
think
the past.
probably that's said enough on that for that one.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, so the next game, this is one that people never ever talk about, and I always think it's a bit of a shame, really, because I think whilst again it's not like maybe a 90, you know, it has its flaws that were pointed out by reviewers at the time. There's a lot to love about this game. And it is, of course, Pegasus, released by Gremlin, developed by Optimus Software Limited. You had a lot of the team that also worked on games like the Amiga ports and the 16-bit ports of Dizzy Fast Food. They did that.
All right.
And Aero the Acrobat games, which were quite fondly loved on the Mega Drive and SNES. But Pegasus, what is it? It is, as I say, came out in 1991, came out on the Amiga and ST. It's a part shoot 'em up, part platformer. So on alternate levels, first level you're flying the Pegasus horse. I think you play Perseus, and the idea is it's basically a horizontal shoot 'em up. You're just flying left to right, shooting all the enemies and making your way through. And then the next level, you land the horse and you're on foot, and that becomes basically a sort of, I don't want to say Rastan because it's sort of different visual style, but it's a sort of Rastan style.
Yeah, hack and slash platformer though.
Yeah, hack and slash platformer, but a lot more zoomed out. So I've always quite liked the variety. I also love the music in it.
Yes, excellent music.
Yeah. The shoot 'em up sections, I think, are a lot stronger than the platform sections, but it's nice to have that variety. It's nice to break up the action. It got middling reviews. This was a sort of 7 out of 10, dropping down to even 50% on grumpy magazines like Amiga Format that always seem to be grumpy with action games. And Amiga Power as well, I think, gave it quite low. I had a lot of fun with it. I mean, what did you think of this game?
Yeah, I mean, I have no nostalgic memories of this.
That's just new to you, this one?
Yeah, absolutely new. And to be honest, I was smitten with it. This is one, because it was new, I had spent a lot more time playing and actually really enjoying it. And I'm the inverse of you. I actually enjoy because I'm a platform
you love
fan sucker. I mean, I love shoot 'em ups, but I just find I've played that many in my days that they become much a muchness, you know. And I know Garen would probably lynch me for saying that, but the variety in the game is good. I mean, first and foremost, when you first play the game, you fire it up, right? There you are on the Pegasus horse flying in the air. And the parallax scrolling and the detail in the sprite work is incredible. Everything from the clouds to the mountain range, and the amount of animation frames on the flapping of the wings on the horse is incredible. Absolutely really good. So I think it's the artwork is beautiful on the game. There's lots of zany creatures to battle against. I think they're quite good. There's things you can't shoot, you have to avoid, as well as the swarms. I
couldn't work out what were those weird bush things with the claw. I don't know what they were.
I don't know what they were either. I was hoping you were going to inform me that.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm not.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm pretty impressed. Yeah, I get where people maybe find the platform inside a bit clunky, and the classic up for jump really shows in this, because you have to get to the real edge of a cliff edge, because it's almost like the maximum leap required to get over the chasms, isn't it? And that can be I think that's what
frustrated me, because you have to get yourself right to the edge and then jump. There's too many of those.
And then too many deaths because of that. But I think it's quite an...
It's competent, though, this section. Yeah, and I didn't mean to downplay it too much. It runs at a wonderful pace. You can tell it was a 16-bit only.
Yeah.
They used the power.
The platforming thing, for the most part, fails because it still gives the bad guys in waveforms to you, which, it's fine if it's a game like Rygar, where there's, you've got a good range weapon to fight with, but just having a sword, the occasional power up that then shoots distances, it does make it hard, because it's a fast game. They come in left and right, thick and fast to you. You're really having to defend yourself on both fronts. But I love the locations in the game, and that's what I really enjoy. But it does have
it's a huge game as well, isn't it? I mean, I think I got to level 20, and then I was thinking, I really need to play some other games. I was enjoying myself with it, but it's like, I mean, one of the nice things, it's got passwords. So once you get to a section, you're like, oh great, I can start from there.
It makes sense, because you don't want to go back to this, even though it is very much an arcade game, and Ghouls and Ghosts wouldn't give you that ability. You know what I mean? Anyone that plays this, and if you want single credit, hats off to them. It's a tough game, but I think it's very unique in its look and its aesthetics, and I'm chuffed that you've brought this under my radar, and I think it's by playing it and giving it a good chunk of time now, it needs to be mentioned on this as a very much Gremlin underdog.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's just one you never hear mentioned, and I used to love this as a kid. I mean, I used to play it quite a bit, and it's just one that I think it did pass a lot of people by, and of course, it didn't help that it only came out on the Amiga and ST, so a lot of people perhaps would have discovered it on the Spectrum if it had come out there or whatever.
Oh, I'd have been all over it in the 8-bit period if it came out, because that did sold to me. But as I said before, a lot of times back in this period, I was dictated to the games my brother chose to purchase or go to Dodgy Dave for. So, there's some classics that I've played now that I could only play in later years simply because exposure was limited.
So I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I think it's great. I think to me this stands out to me for one. If for the listeners, there's Lotus again. There's Switchblade. These boys have mentioned this before. I've played these. Give this one a go and just soak in its visual splendor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to our listeners that are perhaps thinking that, I do apologise that we normally don't like covering games that we've covered before on a show, but you can't have a Gremlin Part 2 in the Amiga era and then not mention Lotus, not mention...
Yeah.
There's so many games that we just had to...
Oh, absolutely.
Re-look at.
And I think we've went back and re-looked at them again and not necessarily just spoke about the nostalgia about them, but giving it time now, let's be... a bit more critical about it and say, well, where does it work? Where does it fail? It may be in the last episode when we've done the Evolutionary Racers, where, we were certainly, rose-tinted glasses and just waxing lyrical over racing games in general. But now we've had time to move away from that and go, right, well, what is the best version of this one or whatnot? So, yeah, it's good to come back sometimes.
Yeah, very, very good. So, right, okay, so we go on to the next game?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so the next game, we're back to supercars again, and Sean Southern and Andrew Morris again. This came out in 1991. They really were in their element, and they were producing such, when you think over just a 2-year period, how many great games that they produced.
Yeah.
Between them, they really were at their height. This only came out, unlike the original, which came out on a variety of platforms. This only came out on the Amiga and ST back in the day. It's like the original in that it's an overhead racer. It's got better visuals. It looks a lot prettier. You've got the shooting element, so there's sort of like being able to take out the other enemies with weapons. You can drop mines, which is like a cool little way of taking out the enemies as well. There's a lot more variety to the tracks, a lot more humour and variety to all those sort of like cutscenes in between where not cutscenes, but they're like little adventure sections, isn't it, where you talk to somebody and you have to, like, you got your driving lessons and things. And you see beautiful artwork throughout, great music. I have a lot more time for this one over the original. There's nice shortcuts as well, isn't it? But yeah, like the first one, I think for me it's just I'm not as keen on overhead racers as you perhaps are. That probably turns me off a little bit. Although having said that, I like Iron Man Stewart and things like that. Yeah. So I mean, what's your thoughts on this one?
I mean, you've covered most of the points I was thinking about. As a more refined version of the game, and if you're going to play one, I would probably more say just aim for this one. There's the refinements just make it a more less cover mount disc game, or a PD game on this one. The fine
fully
tuning,
fleshed out, isn't it?
The fine tuning of the car for repairs. You can retune the spark plugs, fix the exhaust, replace the gearbox, for goodness sake. It's got all of that. So there's a strategy element to it, and I just think The tracks are better. I love how you've got the big ramps you can jump over, you know, on the figure 8 and what else.
I love the train.
Yes.
Going past. There's like bits where you're going over the tracks and you're like, oh no. The
I
train
think
is,
in 2-player mode it's far more. There's a lot more
these
banter.
need to be multiplayer.
Yeah, there's more banter to be had between the players on this one, where you shoot them with your missile or they screw something up. It's better. As I said before, it's less. The tracks feel less modular. They feel less TCR or Scalextric's feel to them. You know, they've got more curves and angles, and they feel like more proper racing tracks. So it's, if you like your top-down racers, this is the one to go for on Gremlin. This one, it's really good.
I love when you have you just brought back a memory. You saying that the like when you used to get the homing missile, like your friend doing it, you can see it go to the track, and you're like trying to, you know, it just misses you because you do a quick turn at last minute. Just things like that.
It has more of that
really good
Mario Kart competitiveness with it. You know, it works because of that.
And like it is that risk and reward through the gates and things, you know, because you time it right and you can go from like 5th to 1st, but if you get it wrong and you go to the door and the door's shut, you're like, oh no, I can't get through.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a fun game. It's one I think for me it's just I do struggle with overhead racers. You know, I probably don't have the love of it of you with things like that. Right, okay. Any more you want to say about that one?
No, I think we've covered it enough for that.
Well, we've covered it in previous episodes as well. So. Right, okay, so this is one that I loved back in the day, and it's still really, really solid. I just don't have the ability to play games like this anymore, I think. And it is Utopia. Now, what can you say about Utopia? It's Utopia, the creation of a nation, I should add.
Yeah,
because
a isometric world building game.
Yeah. Well, the reason I say that is because there's a very famous Utopia game that came out in the early days of like in television and things like that.
All right.
This is isometric. Am I allowed to say isometric? Or
yeah, we can say that in this.
Okay. This is isometric Sim City, mixing in a little bit of battle elements of say Dune or like, you know, Command and Conquer type things, but it's probably more based on the Sim City side of things.
Yeah.
But what was cool, and one of the reasons I loved it as a kid, is unlike Sim City, that was, well, first of all, it's isometric, so it was much more pleasing to the eye than the first Sim City. Obviously, they went down the same path and they did Sim City 2000, wasn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Like that. So it's isometric, looked really, really pretty. But I just loved, as a kid in particular, the whole concept that you're like colonizing an alien planet and you're building on this alien planet. It just was a lot more exciting. It's a really well done game. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of depth to what you can do, but it's it's got a great user interface where it's not too many things to do. It's a bit like early SimCity in that regard, where it's got the depth, but it's quite accessible as well.
Yeah.
You know, the icons are all pretty clear. So I mean, it's a really good game. My problem is when these days, when I go back to a game like this, or even like a modern release game, I mean, I buy them, like, I've got all the latest Civilization and all of these. You know, Phoenix Point, I own that, you know, because I love the idea of games like this. But I just can't, I just can't throw that amount of time. I'd much rather throw it at the limited time that I have to something like a platformer or more action, because I know I don't have to learn it and things like that. I mean, what was your thoughts on this? Was this new to you?
This is completely... I've never even heard of this one. I mean, I'm a bit like you. Back in the day, I liked a lot of the God games more, you know, and some so very like Populous or the Settlers was my go-to game for sure, creating worlds like that. But yeah, this one is very hard just to pick up and play. You really have to learn everything about it, and you know, in a limited time going through the series of games like we're covering, I can only spend so much time on it, and for what it is, I think it's still quite technically impressive and visually excellent. And for people into these more tactical strategy games like this, I think there's a incredible game in here, and it's very underspoken because I've certainly never heard of it, and there's a whole fan base of this type of thing out there, and I'm sure any listeners that like this and have not played this will fire this up and get a lot of worth out of it.
Yeah, no, if you love those sort of games and you are lucky enough to have that sort of time, it's a really good one. I mean, if for people who might have played K240 on the Amiga, it's done by the same team that did that. If you've never played that one, that's another good one. A lot of the team went on to work on things like Graham Ing went on to work on EverQuest and things like that.
Right, okay.
So if you like those sort of ones,
yeah,
it's just it's a solid game, good for what it is. It got wonderful reviews back in the day. Deserved
that's good.
The good reviews, but yeah, it's just like Kingy has said. A lot of it, if I'm honest, is going from my memories with this, because I did play it, I did boot it up, but I was just like, yeah, it's on me. I just don't have the patience for these sort of games now. I think is the problem I had, but I'm glad we had to mention it because it's a well-worthy game, and I knew a lot of people like Kingy perhaps won't have played it before. So we go on to the next game then.
Yes, please.
So this is a real favourite of mine. It's one of my favourite games on the Amiga, actually, and it is Switchblade 2. Now, we mentioned our love of Switchblade, the first one, but the second one's quite a different beast in that it's gone to the cute hero squash character to a more Strider-looking type character. A lot more emphasis on firing this time, your gun. rather than you still have like a blade. There's none of this like powering up your shot, so I think that's one of the things I love about it. You'll recognise some of the enemies from the first one, but visually it's a lot more. I think as much as I love the original Switchblade graphics, I think the graphics here are really, really impressive. And more importantly, it does have a lot more variety to the levels. So whereas the first one had just the underground grey complex, here you'll be going above ground and you'll be going on, you know, completely different colour palettes, different looks. It blew me away as a kid. As I say, this came out in 1991, and it basically, this was not long after I had my Amiga, and it was the first time that I felt, you know, there was a handful of games where you just thought, wow, the Amiga can really do arcade graphics. And, you know, I sort of see Switchblade 2 as quite comparable to a lot of console games at the time that you sort of looked at enviously. Because as much as you loved your Amiga, it's undeniable that although you paid for it, there was a lot more polish put on partly because they weren't being lumbered with the Atari ST, he says. Sorry, ST owners, I shouldn't. I'm mean.
Cruel.
Naughty Paul.
That's cruel.
Naughty Paul. But I love this game. It also has, this is the one that has the hidden game Chrome hidden away on it, which is one we alluded to earlier, which was like the very simplified version of Venus Flytrap. So pretty amazing you got that as a hidden free game as well. I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but I mean, what's your thoughts of this?
Yeah, you've nailed it in saying that it really made it look like a console game, that kind of polish. It would have been the envy of your colleagues with the Mega Drive or the SNES. This is the quality we're talking about here. This wasn't, as I always joke about, a lot of the Amiga games, although good, are Genesis games bought from Wish.com, you know. And that's been cruel. I'm just being light humour off it. I think the quality and calibre of this is excellent. Although I've got a renewed love for Switchblade 1, you go back and play this and you went, this is just brilliant. The core elements that still made the first one good are within this, you know, that you can't see it all off the screen until you walk into it, and it's you know, there's still the weak walls to shoot and different directions to take. It's refined. I mean, it does look, although as you said, not squashed, it still is within the kind of canon of the game, the looks, isn't it? It's still in the Switchblade universe. It's an incredible game, and you're right, it's far more diverse. The different locations you go to just break up the monotony of the game, and it's just great. And the levels are well thought out. I think it's brilliant. It really is good.
I really enjoy. And this team, obviously they did Venus the Flytrap, which we'd already talked about. They worked on Zool, and they also did the Pitfall, the main adventure. If you remember that for the console, which was an alright platform.
It's okay.
Special.
Graphically nice, just a bit weak in the level design, I would say.
Yeah, very sort of European level design.
Yes, good way to put it.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I because partly probably because I played it first, I fell in love with this game, and therefore always found it a little bit difficult to go back. This was up there with, like, you know, Turrican.
I was about to say that, it's up there with Turrican. Yeah. I mean, that flamethrower that you can fire out your wrist is fantastic on it, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I know Simon Phipps really doesn't like this game. I mean, he had nothing to do with the sequel. So this time he was working for Core Design. And I get it in that he probably wasn't happy the different look and feel of the game. But I'm kind of glad that they did their own thing rather than try to recreate what he
You don't want to wear dead man's shoes, are you? You want to do your different take on it and refine it from something that was just done as a hobby and flesh it out and give the quality of the game it is. It's up there with one of the better Amiga games that anybody could play.
So. Yeah. I mean, I will say that to you know, to a lot of our listeners, because I know a lot of our listeners don't have much experience with Amiga and ST. You know, they came more from the 8-bits and then went to consoles. But, you know, if you're looking for games you perhaps not played before, because likewise this passed a lot of people by, because it only it was only a handful of quite obscure systems that
Yeah.
came out on. This is really good. If you know, and if you've played Assassin on the Amiga, this is the better game.
Mm-hmm.
And to our American listeners, you know, if you're looking to explore the wonder that is the Amiga and discover new games, I can heartily recommend this one.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Yeah. Any more you want to sort of say with this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think really, really solid game. It did get a Lynx port. That might be more accessible for some people.
You ever played it?
Never played it. I imagine it's not. I imagine you struggle with a small screen, but I've not played it. But beyond that, it only really came out in the Amiga and ST. They're pretty much the same. I mean, there's no real difference.
Sure.
Love the music of Barry Leach as well. He shows again here, as he does in a lot of the games that we're going to cover.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So, shall we go on to the next game then?
Yes, please.
So this is a real favourite of mine. It's a very weird game, and it's not without its flaws, but it's so amazing music and weird, unique graphics that it sort of just wins me over. What is it? It's Harlequin, which came out in 1992. Developers were the Warp Factory, that of course, you know, did the Zool 2.
Yeah.
They're probably better known for. They did a few other things. It's got fantastic music by Barry Leach, again, some of his best.
Yeah.
And that's saying something when you've got games like Lotus 2 and the intro music. What is it though? It's how do we describe it? You play a Harlequin, so that's like a
Jester,
if you like, with like a one of those eye masks. And the idea is you go through this magical kingdom. You fire hearts at the enemies to destroy them. So you're firing your love, said the actress to the bishop. And it's, I don't know, it's just got wonderful effects. It's the music really helps, and it's just a really interesting platformer that is rock hard. That's one thing I will say about it. But it does keep you playing because it's got so much variety and wonderment to the levels.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your thoughts of this one?
Oh, I mean, this is one of my most favourite Amiga games of all time, mate. I mean, it was back in the sort of early days, sort of one of my more earlier exposures, and just knew the Amiga was here to stay with this. I knew then at this point that the landscape of the mechanics of platform games was completely changing. From a person that was so used to, because of the limitations on the spectrum, most platform games, explorative ones, were flick screen. You know, whether it be Technician Ted or Jet Set Willy or Jack the Nipper 2, you know, countless games like that. So I was so used to that kind of, you know, layout of how these type of games were. And then comes this more 8-way scrolling platformer, which is just bizarre and zany, and there's a flavour of the level design and thing in a spring in this, which we mentioned in the 8-bit episode. That kind of nutty, laney, zany layout to the games, but that doesn't detract from it being well designed, and it is. It's just it's a difficult platforming game. Thank goodness that you get, you know, an umbrella to parachute yourself down, because you can only fall from certain certain heights before you start losing energy, or you get the space hopper to, you know, bounce about on. But what makes this game stand out, made it a bit more difficult and people will get lost, is it's non-linear in that way. You can, you know, go your own routes in different directions, providing you find the switches to activate certain things. So there's no clue in the game when you flick a switch what it actually does. Now, that didn't bother me in the day, because I found my way about well, and I invested a hell of amount of time playing the game, and I knew, you know, just by exploration, that's what that does. You knew the levels like the back of your hand, so you knew when you returned to a different area, that's changed, this is what this switch has actually done. So it's quite good in that way, but it's probably its weakest point, that people would find themselves against a dead end because they're just not sure what they've done. But that was the nature of early doors. It's because it still is an early doors platform game. The finesse you get in a Mario game now, or whatever else, or Sonic, it's not like that now. It's well mapped out and planned. This is just a bit more, you know, less structured, a bit more chaotic. But really good.
A couple of developers say, "Oh, let's do this. That would be cool."
Yeah. We'll worry about that bit when we get to that bit. I've not decided what that switch does, but we'll create a flag here and we'll decide later on when we design the level what the switch does, you know. But I love it. I love the animation. As you said, the Barry Leach's music's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And this will always be up there with one of my most favourite Amiga games. This and Flood and, you know, First Samurai, stuff like that. I just love all these kind of games.
Yeah, and again, this is one that to a lot of our listeners, because it only really came out on the Amiga and ST, didn't come out anywhere else. It's one that a lot of people pass them by, you know, because it's not often on people's, you know, the games you think of even on the Amiga first, you know, to a lot of people. So, you know, I'm hoping to a lot of our listeners that perhaps where the Amigas they're new to, this is another one well worth trying. Just keep in mind that, like we mentioned, if you're going in thinking Mega Man or a lot more polished games like Mario or things like that, you'll probably go away a bit disappointed. This is that slightly more rough and ready design, but there's a certain charm to it. And there's that challenge that you mentioned where it's a bit more difficult to know what to do, but if you throw the time at it, it's wonderful. And I think you will have a good time even if you aren't willing to put it in, because you'll see hearing that amazing Amiga music, and there really hasn't been a platformer like this. I mean, probably Pandemonium's probably the closest.
Very true. Modern adaptation of it. I mean, there's elements that are maybe a bit James Pondy and stuff like that, but if you want a visual representation of what we're kind of,
it's just that darker visual style, isn't it?
Yeah, which makes it better. It's not a cutie platformer. This.
No,
that's right.
But I mean, it's colourful. It's not sombre.
No,
it's got wonderful colour to it.
It's like when he's come to his homeland, and it's all the bright and fanciful colours of a performing Harlequin. So he's just trying to restore that love to the land and bring that back to it. And I think the level design, although you do get lost, is very good. And each different stage looks
so much variety.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, definitely. It's and I love the visual effect when you open there's like little presents around for the pickups. I love how that just like has that effect where it whooshes up in the air and all these lovely sparkles and stuff. Yeah, no, I mean this is one that I think is genuinely will be a hidden gem for a lot of people, and I'd love to know if some of our listeners try this one to hear your views on it. I suppose the only other thing is although there's other power-ups you can buy or pick up, the firing of the hearts, because they're that curved nature, can be quite frustrating as well.
That's like getting the torch and ghosts and goblins.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing that you sort of hit on is because it's quite vertical in nature in terms of the scrolling, that's where the frustration comes in, because, as you say, although you have that ability to sort of float down and control your landing a little bit, if you have that pickup, it's really frustrating. You know, you could get all the way to the top and then you muck up and and then you have to do the whole like damn level jumps again.
Yeah, because it's quite sensitive, and I've forgotten how fast the game runs at as well.
Impressive,
Yeah.
Very impressive game. I know we've covered it before, and I know we probably covered it longer than we should have for this show, but it is a special game.
Yeah.
Right, so we go on to the next one then.
Oh, you're excited about this one, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Now, Lotus 3, the often maligned Lotus 3. So obviously you had Turbo Lotus Esprit that was in 1990. Then in 1992 you had Lotus 2, which sort of improved, but went to that checkpoint version. Now, the third one, I think it got quite disappointing reviews, and I think it's such a shame that it did. Because I think this, for me personally, I think this is probably the best of the three. And I know that's quite a controversial opinion. The reasons I love it, first of all, you got the music by Patrick Phelan. Now, you'll probably know his music from Zool 2. But his music here is phenomenal. I mean, there is so many great tunes. As much as I love Barry Leach's music, and I think it's clear what a fan I am of his, I'm more equally a fan of Patrick Phelan's music. Some of the tunes like Breathless and things like that are just awesome, awesome. Some of my favourite Amiga tunes, and a nice variety. Now, what does this do? Well, it's like the second one in that it will go full screen as you'd expect, but it will also do split screen. It adds additional car, so as well as the Turbo Lotus Esprit and the Elan, it's got like a futuristic well, it's still a car, but it's got a futuristic, never released Lotus car, a concept car, which was a nice touch. And consequently, some of the tracks are in futuristic locations, which is a nice touch. It's got all the variety, but one of the things I love with it is two elements with this. The first thing is there's a lot more variety to the tracks, and you can choose between either laps or random, or you can choose you can choose actually sort of like a checkpoint like the original, or a progression. There's different like progressions. So there's lots of options of the style of game, so that's a big tick for me. But the other thing that you've got to talk about with this game is it's called Rex, and it's basically a construction kit for Lotus that's built in the game that's really easy to use. It's basically like putting together Scalextrics. You just choose your piece of the track and build whatever track you want and whatever settings you want, and then race on it. So there's so much replayability, and it was great, getting your code and being able to save, because you could sort of like share that with your mates and things like that, where you could say, "Oh, try this." It was like your Mario creator of today, just that excitement of like being able to, I can create like levels.
Yeah.
Yeah, a huge fan of this one. I think it often gets overlooked by people because by the time it came out in 1992, perhaps the Amiga was still, it was late 1992, so the Amiga was perhaps beginning to lose its luster a little bit, and perhaps people were beginning to look to the snares and things like that, and things. So I think that's why it's probably not as fondly remembered. But I mean, what's your thoughts of this one?
Yeah, for all the points you made, I agree with you in many ways. On a cursory glance, you'd think it is just more of the same from 2, but the tracks are wider. There's more obstacles on the tracks. As you say, the track editor is the cherry on top that just gives longevity in the game. So for that alone, you've just got to give it kudos. If you saw this first, you would never have went back to it, let's be honest about it. So it's nice to evolve and see a game series, move on and see what differences it gives. Is it enough for your hard-end cash? If you weren't going to Dodgy Dave for it, it's hard to tell in this day and age, looking back at it from more sort of cynical adult eyes. But it is an excellent quality game that, I'd maybe agree with you. If you now say, if you're going to play any of the Lotus games with that excellent music as well, for the excellent music, it's 1 in 3. Nothing wrong with Barry Leitch's music, but 1 in 3 is more moodier.
There's more variety here, isn't there?
Yeah.
You got a lot more variety to the, and maybe that's partly because they got better. I think with compression and things, they were able to fit more music.
Yeah.
The game.
The rain effect is just fantastic in this on one of the levels. Yeah, there's nice touches. I think there's some more detail in the background scenes and that as well. So I mean, I love them all. I don't want to be critical of any of them because it's a series.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a brilliant series. But I guess what I wanted to do is I wanted to shout this one out in particular. Yeah. Maybe I'm over egging it a little bit, maybe in doing so. But it's one that everybody always says, oh, Lotus 2. And yet there's a lot more variety. I mean, I love the cliff level where you're driving. Yes, exactly. On the cliff. So it's just so much more variety to things.
That cliff level remembers me of Sega's Turbo.
Yeah.
I love, and that's my favourite bit in Turbo as well. So it's just quite exhilarating having that, drop off cliff edge to your left hand side. It's like, oh shit.
And you got like the crosswinds and things. And you say that, I mean, the weather effects, like you mentioned, like the storm and things like that. I mean, it's so well done with the lightning in the background.
Yeah, the weather effects is excellent. Really good. So it's another quality title.
I'll be honest. The futuristic levels are probably the weakest part. I think that puts a lot of people off because it doesn't quite work. They've kind of done almost like a nod to Trailblazer,
Trailblazer,
where the bouncing ball on the track. They've done that same sort of checkered look on the futuristic look, but it looks a little ugly, if honest. But everything else I just can't fault it. I think this is one that people never go to because they always go to the second one, and I get that's where people's nostalgic memories. But my big shout out for this is give the third one a try because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And that construction kit is so much fun. Yeah. God, what I would do to have Sean Southern and Andrew Morris to have worked on like Outrun and things like that. As well.
Outrun construction kit. There's a release for you. You'd never be stopping making tracks.
Well, there is actually a construction. I mean, obviously unofficial, but have you ever played the Cannonball? Yeah. So just a quick note to our listeners: Cannonball is like a PC release. It's come out on MAME and things, but basically it's a very talented UK individual who has basically back engineered the Outrun. And he's made improvements. He's given it widescreen. He's given it 60 frames per second.
Yeah, no slowdown.
It's the ultimate way of playing it. But one of the things that he's added, which is awesome, is for the arcade version, a construction kit, which is just as easy to use as Rex, to be honest. So it's just as a side, but that's really, really good. But of course, as good as that is, it's different times and on the PC and things like that, which
for sure.
Turns a lot of people away. Fantastic. Right, okay, so we'll go on to the next game then.
Yeah, more wheels.
More wheels, yeah. So this is Nigel Mansells World Championship game. Now, this actually came out on the SNES and the Mega Drive, as well as like the Amiga and ST. It was a big deal back in the day. I mean, it came out on loads of platforms. It even came out on the Game Boy, God bless it, and even the Amstrad CPC, amazingly, and Spectrum. But what is it? This is done by a sort of internal Gremlin graphic team that eventually went to become very prolific. And Damien Hibbard went on to work at Sumo Digital. It's got the music of Pat Phelan again as well, which is worthy a note, the one that did Lotus 3. Less interesting here, if honest. But this is a wonderful, fast, well put together racer that just came out at the right time. It came out in 1992. They were really lucky because this was the year when Nigel Mansell actually won the World Championship. Yeah. So to have a license with him on the front was a big deal. Yeah. But thankfully this wasn't a cash in. It was a really good arcade Formula 1 racer. Yeah. Now obviously the Amiga was really well served with racers, and Vroom that we've mentioned about came later on. Yes. Which was really impressive. But I've always loved the fact this was what I wanted when I got the Super Monaco GP port on the Amiga. This is what I wanted. You know, that fast speed. It doesn't have the annoying where one hit and you've destroyed your car. Right. It's just arcade racy. There's different difficulty levels, which obviously give you less chance of failing. But going back to it, really, really fast. As you go through all these Formula 1 tracks, really impressive speed. I had a lot of fun with this. It's one that I hadn't gone back to for years, and I was quite surprised how good it is, really. I mean, what's your thoughts of this one?
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I've not went and played this in a very long time, and it really stands the test of time. The speed is still incredible on it. It plays really well. The graphics still stand out. You know, it brings back the vibes I got when I first got Checkered Flag on the Spectrum, and I enjoyed that and played that because I didn't have a lot of games, you know, at the beginning, and to get the Checkered Flag was great anyway. But this just gives that, as you said, it's just an arcade game without the technical faff that I can't be arsed with. So if you want a bit, stay off the highways and go on famous circuits and race them, but without being hindered by technical aspects, and this is one to try. It's just actually really good, really enjoyable. I love all the little touches on it. I love how when one of the wheels is on the rough areas, it really wobbles and vibrates and whatnot else. The hands on the steering wheel turning it around, and you have all the 2D sprites and the barriers have that really good, rendered 3D feel to them, don't they? It's really good.
Yeah, no, I was because I'm always a sucker for, like you, with pixel artwork. I mean, as good as 3D, obviously, like pixel artwork does hold up, and this was a real nice palette cleanser because at the time you had obviously Jeff Crammond's wonderful sort of Formula 1 racing, which that was just in another world. Really impressive. But obviously that was a simulation first and foremost, and of course in the on the Amiga it really was running. It was too much for the Amiga, really. I mean, you go back to it now and you see like the slow frame rate, and how did we survive? But this, going back to this, the fact that it was arcadey, the fact it was quite forgiving, and had that wonderful sense of speed. I always remember particularly on the console version, but do you remember the Rick Mail? Because he did a whole series of Nintendo adverts.
I don't recall them, to be honest.
I don't remember.
No.
I'll put it in the show notes, but I'll maybe even do a short clip here.
Hi, I'm Nigel Mansell, and I'm not the type of guy who buys his family presents that he really wants for himself. That's why I bought my wife Nigel Mansell's World Championship game from Nintendo. You have to choose the right tyres, pit stop, and race against the best drivers in the world. It's just like the real thing, and my wife loves it. Right, darling?
Hi, it's very realistic, Nigel.
My little girls love it too. Right, twins?
Completely true.
Hey, even my dog loves it. Right, Fang? Woof. So, There you have it. I think it's a wonderful game, and if your family's anything like mine, they'll love it too, right, girls?
Nigel Mansell, intensely intelligent Nintendo.
Yeah, so I mean, it's him dressed up as Nigel Mansell, so in other words, like a impossibly fake moustache. And you know, hi, I'm Nigel Mansell, and I like to, you know, all of that.
Funny.
You know, the clip. I love Rick Mail. It's a sad loss to us all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it always sticks in my mind when I play this game. Yeah, going back to it, very, very impressed with this. I just showed you what the Amiga was capable of in the right hands. And it's nice, you know, as say, a few of these people that they've gone on to do, like Damien Hibbert, as I say, went on to Sumo Digital. So he worked on like some of my favourite racing games, like Sonic All-Star Racing, and he worked on Superstar Tennis, Sega Superstar Tennis, and you know, some of the home ports that they did. So yeah, great game, and it was great going back to it. I had real fun with it. Any more you want to say on that?
No, I think.
Oh, actually, there's one more thing I want to say, which
What
made
you
me
forgot?
laugh. You've also got improve with Mansell mode. And that really made me laugh. So it's a nice idea. So basically, any of the tracks you can race with Nigel Mansell. So the idea is you sort of like race along, and you've got like a disembodied head, a digitized version of his head, in the top left-hand corner, and it shows you the racing line, the best racing line, so you can learn the tracks.
Yeah.
And it did make me laugh though, that because obviously he's coming up with comments of what he's sort of saying, and they're like really useful things, Kingy, like don't bash into things and don't go off the track, and you're like, well, thank you for that, you know, it's really good. Yeah, it's a bit silly, but I mean, it is actually quite useful if you're trying to perfect this game, seeing that racing line. And also being able to race. It's quite fun racing with no other cars on the track.
Yeah.
You know, I always like it with that. I just thought it was a nice touch that they added in. Only in the 16-bit versions they added it in. But just a nice little... Yeah, just wanted to mention it. But yeah, a great game, and another one I think people should go back to. It holds up really well. Right, okay, so I know it's a lot of games we're covering here, but let's go on. Now, this is another favourite of mine. We spoke about Hero Quest. Well, Milton Bradley and Warhammer had such, Games Workshop had so much success with Hero Quest. In the board games, they created a game that was basically a simplified version of Space Hulk. Which was like a big board game for Games Workshop, but simplified it and called it Space Crusade. And this had a lot of the same ideas as Hero Quest. It had a nice idea with scanning, where you could choose to scan, and in the vicinity the blips would show, so you know when things, you know, monsters or probably objects nearby, which was kind of cool. Gave you that alien vibe watching those blips come towards you. But very much it was Hero Quest, but with futuristic. You play Space Marines, and you're up against Gene Stealers, basically.
Yeah.
And Gretchens and variety, Space Orcs and a variety of monsters. And Gremlin, naturally, this time in-house, but still the same development team, really. Had so much success with Hero Quest, some of the people who worked on it. It's got Barry Leach doing the music again. They did a recreation, and like Hero Quest, it was a really faithful recreation of the game. I mean, what's your thoughts of this one?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose because I prefer fantasy over sci-fi, I never took to this nor the board game for it as much as I did Hero Quest, but that's fine. I think the only disappointment I found when I ever played this was that it wasn't always an isometric view like Hero Quest. It's only during the action scenes does it jump to that perspective. For the rest of the time it's top down. But I understand why, and it doesn't detract from it being a excellent tactical game. It's still a very good game. It just takes getting used to after, you know, what you're familiar with, that's all. It felt like a step backward back in the day. But despite that, it's still deeply involving. It's just sci-fi. It's not really my thing in the same way.
Yeah, so I've always preferred sci-fi. So as much as I love Hero Quest, I really enjoyed with this one.
Yeah.
I mean, at any point you can switch it to isometric, but only to see.
To see, you know.
To see it, yeah.
Yeah.
And I get why they did it, because it does make it a lot easier to play in 2D.
It does, absolutely. It's a different style of game.
And I think they did it because you needed that wider area.
Yes.
Because it's all about, unlike Hero Quest, where it's predominantly melee attack, here it's mostly you're firing weapons.
Yeah.
It's got some nice touches. I love the brutality when your Space Marines die. You're left like smouldering boots.
Yeah.
In the 3D, and it's like, oh, that's harsh. Nice animation, as you say, with it all, and it's kind of cool. You get to play like 3 divisions: the Imperial Fist, Ultramarines, and Blood Angels.
See, these things are all lost to me, not being into Warhammer.
Yeah,
person
see, for me, I was like Warhammer 40k first and foremost. But yeah, I mean, of the, if you like games like XCOM and Laser Squad and things like that, I think you'll quite like this. Yeah. I do prefer Hero Quest, though. I do think it's the better game, but this is really solid version of it as well. Yeah. Right, so we go on to the next
Yes, please.
game. Yeah, so apologies, it's been such a long episode, but as I say, we had to shout all these games out, really, and I really wanted to give a broad cross section of the wonderful period of Gremlin in this era. Now, the next game is called VideoKid. Now, this came out in 1992 on the Amiga and ST. It didn't come out on any other platforms. I think Antstream certainly did have it for a time. What is it? It's developers by Twilight. Now, that probably will stand out to a lot of people because Twilight, as well as doing things like Alfred Chicken, and they even did the Amiga port of Live and Let Die, actually. They also did Megatwin's home port and a lot of the Hanna-Barbera games. And the Megatwins, you'll notice a lot of visual similarities between that arcade game and this. But this is very much a shooter. So, what is it? You play VideoKid, which is a slightly annoying looking character. He's like a wizard in the first level. And you basically fly around. It's force scrolling, so you sort of make your way through. Yeah. And the idea is you shoot all the enemies. So it's more shooting because you're floating around than, say, Megatwins or something like that. But it is all very about sort of like knowing the levels where all the enemy placements are, and being lucky with the weapons that you get. to allow you to shoot the enemies. You know, when you get diagonal shots, that makes it a lot easier in lots of sections. It's visually, it's got a wonderful hand-drawn pixel art, very bright and colourful. And I love the fact that every level, you know, whether you go to like Wild West, so each is like a genre of film.
Yeah.
And our character will wear different outfit depending on which level he's in. So the first one's fantasy, so he's obviously a wizard. Space, he's wearing a space helmet.
Western, he's
wearing a cowboy hat, etc.
Prohibition era America, I think, as well.
Yeah.
A gangster.
Gangster level. Yeah. And a horror, he's sort of like a vampire. I have fond memories of this game, but before I go into it anymore, I mean, what's your memories of this?
Absolutely none. This is new to me. Never heard it, never played it before, so I got a lot of fun out of this. I mean, yes, it's a simplistic shooter, but graphically it is amazing.
Yeah.
It really is amazing. Just the little touches. I love, like what you mentioned, the different themes and the costumes that the main sprite changes. It's a fixed kind of path scrolling one that you have to, you know, the dangers come towards you. It's a nice, it's not quite a cute 'em up, I wouldn't call it that either, but I mean, they're more cutie like drawings, but I love it. I think it's a very, very sort of, you know, noble shooter on the Amiga, to be honest.
Yeah, I think because I always have a soft spot for what I call cute 'em ups in terms of like the cartoony sort of like graphics. It's a great visual style. There's lots of variety to the levels because you're doing different things.
Yeah.
The character's slightly annoying. When you die and he goes no sweat, sometimes you want to punch his little face. It's tough. It is tough, but it is one you can improve upon because there's a lot of memory. You know, I mean, obviously, if you play it with a cheat, it's fun because you get to see the visual elements. But you know, I tried to play a lot of these properly without cheats.
No, I put the cheats on. I put the trainer on. I wanted to see it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did that at the end when I realised.
Yeah, because I realised how shite I was at it. But
it is. As I say, I'm glad I spent the time without the cheats, just because you do get a new appreciation of it, where you know it's kind of. You get that little bit better each time. It's one of those.
You do,
therefore it comes. And it's a nice variety of weaponry as well that you build up, which I thought was nice.
And the boss fights, that's what came as a biggest surprise, was the size of the sprites on the boss fights. The bosses are massive, take up about a third of the screen. They're really impressive and great animations on them. Yeah,
no, absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, I think this is great. And you can certainly see sort of Peter Tattersall, who did the game. You can certainly see, you know, a lot of similarities to his art style of Alfred Chicken. Alfred Chicken is probably one that people played a lot more. And if you like that kind of visual style, or you like the Amiga port of Mega Twins, this is a good. Or actually, all the Hanna-Barbera. He did pretty much all the Hanna-Barbera ones.
There's nothing wrong with the Hanna-Barbera ones. I think they're all. Playable.
particularly from a graphical standpoint, which is, you know, what Peter did the graphics. You know, so if you're a fan of those kind of graphics, I think it's a fun, solid game. It got middling reviews, but it's quite bizarre. And by that I mean like 70% kind of reviews. I find it bizarre. A lot of the complaints were people saying, "Oh, it's just back in the day," of people saying, "Oh, it's just Mega Twins," but with more shooty elements. It's like, no, I think it stands up a lot more visually. Yes, it's got that same brightness and vibrancy, but I don't see that as a criticism.
No, not at all. We should be praising that.
I had a lot of. I mean, back in the day, I had a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah,
because I just love the shoot 'em ups and cute 'em ups in particular. It's not top tier shoot 'em up. It's probably, if you're a shooter aficionado, you'll probably turn your nose up at it in terms of the gameplay mechanics. But if you're looking for a bit of diversion and fun, I think you could do a lot worse than this. It's a nice little game, and one that I think a lot of people won't have ever discovered because it only came out on the Amiga and ST. So
for sure.
It's lovely.
I think there's a lot of real graphical elements to that. It comes as a huge surprise game. Like I said, the massive sprites. There's a bit in the futuristic spacey world where there's a circuit board or a computer, and you see all the chips wobbling, and then they come out their sockets and come flying towards you. And I just thought it was brilliant. That just small touches. The small touches in the games, just everything. Because each level's a different theme, there's no repeated assets either. So you've got so many different sprites. So the Western world obviously got cowboys and Indians kind of thing, vultures and whatnot else.
I love the horror of the fact that they've decided to go black and white.
Excellent touch. Just about to say that. It just makes it all the more spooky, doesn't it? He's the only coloured thing in it, and you've got the sort of, the bats with the big heads and the cloaked
skeletons.
It's just, it's great. It really is great.
Yeah, I think, and it's one that nobody ever talks about these days. I think
I'm glad you have, because this is a new one to me. I'll always put my hands up when I'm ignorant of a game, and this was just off my radar completely.
Oh, fantastic. Well, this is what, part of what we like to do is not just talk about the classic games that everybody remembers, but hopefully some new discoveries for people to try.
For sure.
So I'll just have a slurp of my coffee. I discovered, actually, just as a slight aside, going around a mate's house, because I'm too lazy to make proper coffee. He had Kenko Melanico.
Okay, yeah, I know this stuff.
Yeah, I've never tried it before.
I use that at work. Yeah, I use that at work. We've got an espresso machine in the house, so we're super. We're posh and lazy.
Yeah. No, I'm just. I find in the past when I've had like cafetières and things like that, I usually, or even like filter things, I find it just takes up so much space. I just never use it after a bit.
For sure.
So I'm pleased to have found.
That stuff's nice. Yeah.
Sorry, it's aside, listeners, but.
And this is the Coffee Podcast. Thank you.
Yes. Right, so we go on to the next game.
Yes, back on the wheels, I believe.
Back on the wheels, yeah. So now this was a real pleasant surprise for me, because I'll be honest, I've never spent a serious amount of time.
You're not right,
with this
okay.
game. Because, so what is it? It's Top Gear. Now, if I was Sean Southern and Andrew Morris, I would be absolutely livid, because this is such a blatant rip-off, to the point of the Lotus games, to the point where I do wonder whether they just lifted the core code. It's that close.
I know.
But it is a different development house. Different development team, and purely Gremlin. I mean, this isn't published by different publishers back in the day on the SNES and things like that. But this is definitely purely a Gremlin game, hence why we include it here. It really is basically the Lotus in all but name on the Super Nintendo, and therefore, but it has the amazing music of Barry Leach.
It's funny that how there's weird jumping elements of that, isn't it? That Barry Leach was in the team and he wasn't for Lotus, and but I mean, obviously it's in-house, well, not in-house, but all the developers that Gremlin has at
just availability,
the availability, yeah, and they have their musician at this point, the go-to musician, and he's one of them.
Yeah, because when we come to some of the sequels, Barry Leach, I don't think was doing the sequels, so it's strange. I guess he wants to mix it up. But gameplay-wise, I mean, playing this, the first thing that really stuck out to me was Horizon Chase Turbo, which Kingy and me have spoken about
Yeah.
many a time. It's a fantastic modern indie game that I noticed on Steam right now. It's only £3.09.
Steal. An absolute steal at
Absolute
that
steal.
price.
It's an amazing game. You can pick it up on pretty much any platform. But all the things that I thought were quite unique with Horizon Chase Turbo, like the speech bubble appearing above the car, just the whole structure of like getting fuel and things like that, and turbo buttons. I realise now is actually it's this game, Top Gear, the Top Gear series. It's really somebody who's fallen in love with the Top Gear games that's recreated it on modern platforms, because it's almost like for like, you know, the speech bubbles, everything is on here, and I really like the touches that this team did over the Lotus games. You know, you've got all the fast speed and everything here, but there's wonderful variety. It shows how capable the SNES was, even without using Mode 7.
Yeah.
And it's all the better for not using Mode 7 in some ways, because obviously with Mode 7, as good as that was, you get that sort of pixelated, blocky look feel to it. And of course, you're limited by everything being flat, whether this still moves blisteringly fast as the Lotus game. Still a huge amount of fun. But I think it's nice that it's all gone back to doing positions and laps, which is one of the things I think as we discussed about the Lotus games, I think went in, for me, the wrong direction with. So it's nice that they've gone back to sort of like positions, and it's all about, you know, qualifying, getting a high enough position on each track and then doing all 7.
Absolutely. Loads
of variety. The music, as I say, some of Barry Leach's best. In fact, you'll notice some of the tunes, if you've played Horizon, he's reused and remastered some of the tunes that he used in his Top Gear game. So it's nice to hear hear the original, as it were. I mean, what's your thoughts with this?
Yeah, I mean, I was delighted. I got this cheap, and I was down in Morecambe, out of all places, many years ago, and there was a gaming fair on when I was there on the Saturday, and the missus fell out of me because I must have spent about £100 on SNES games. You know, they were all like a tenner, some were a fiver, some were so I came home with a glut of excellent games. And what was delighted with this is, at this point, my bloody Amiga had died, so I didn't have my fix of this type of game. So I was oblivious to what it was. You know, I didn't buy that many Nintendo I bought a few Nintendo magazines, but obviously this game was out before I started buying them, and I was a happy man. It was just exactly what I wanted, you know. And what's impressive is, I mean, obviously there's some better hardware handling on the SNES's bespoke chips and all the rest. So the speed, the frame rate that this game runs at is quite incredible, isn't it? And it really stands out. And I think you're right about not using that pixelated mode. It's all the better. I had read on that Gremlin in the Works book that it's some other chip that handles a kind of warping thing, and it chooses the colour of each line in the game, so it can give that kind of the whole distancing effect, some witchcraft and voodoo that they do in video gaming. So there's something very particular with the SNES are able to do this effect without the Mode 7. And yeah, it's just great music, great game. And if you're right, the Turbo Horizon brought back so many memories of this, and Lotus as well, obviously. Just the whole mood and the vibe and the feel of this period of gaming. And if we're talking about ripping off Lotus, Jaguar didn't do much better in terms of ripping off either, did it? So.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that game as well. I mean, obviously this does do the fuel. It does have nitros, isn't it? Which in the Top Gear, which is a nice touch. Yeah, it was a real surprise for me, because I've played it a little bit, but I've never owned this game, so it's always been on emulators.
Aye.
And it's always been, oh, that's nice, it's Lotus, I'll go to the Lotus, because that's what I remember. And I'd never spent proper time with it, and I'm glad I did, because I fell in love with this series. It's like finding a lot more Lotus games to play.
Yeah.
One thing I will note is in the first one, like in the original Turbo Lotus, it's always split screen, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Where the second player shows the computer racing. It's a nice touch. It's a bit better than the
blank
sing like the pit stop. And I guess it sort of feels nice that you feel like you're always racing against an opponent, which is kind of cool. I had a lot of time with this. This was a pleasant surprise for me, and it's got me wanting to play Horizon Chase Turbo as well.
I'm kind of in the mood for it now as well, actually, because I've not played much of the DLC pack that came out.
And I have played quite a bit, but it's it's one of those, because I love the game so much, I've picked up on every single console because it's always in the sale. It's always in the sale. You know, you don't mind for a couple of quid, but it's that good.
Of course.
So I am in the mood to go back to it. So to our listeners, you probably know Top Gear, particularly if you come from a console background, but really holds up well. Okay, so we'll go on to the next game then. So this is Zool. Now, we've covered this many time. I mean, what can you say about it that's not already been said? I mean, obviously, I played it to death recently, or the Zool Redemensioned, which was great fun. You can pick up, it's like a remaster of this game. But this was Gremlin, and Gremlin's answer to Sonic the Hedgehog. And they... you had like you play an alien called Zool. He looks like an ant, and it's very fast, it's very bright, it's very colourful. You always, when you play it, you're always reminded of the bright colours and the Chupa Chup adverts everywhere, isn't it, on the Sweet level. It's slightly different from Sonic, where you can actually fire. It's a lot more shooty than that. You can do a spin attack, a bit more like Sonic. He's quite athletic, isn't he? He can like cling on to the side of cliffs and things like that and work his way up. So it's got like Strider elements as well. I mean, what can you say with this one?
I mean, they were looking for a strong brand character, weren't they? Because every other console had this at the time. You had Mario on the SNES, even Zelda series, and then obviously Sonic and whatnot on the Mega Drive. So the comparisons didn't do it any harm, because it got it noticed. So the more people say this is the Amiga's answer to Sonic, sold units, so enough to spawn a sequel. Enjoyable game. I think it's got a lot of elements in it. Really shows off the bright colour palette of the Amiga. It's incredible that way. It just lacks the quality and finesse of its Japanese counterparts. It is very much that British take on it. It would be unfair to say that Zool was a knee-jerk reaction to Sonic. That would be a bit too cruel to say. I think it stands out on its own as much as well. It's a diabetic's nightmare, this game, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's got lots of nice touches. I love how it's the way the creatures all explode into pieces when you hit them, whether it be the licorice all sorts or the blancmange jelly things. It's all cool, everything's all breakable and squishy and, you know, all sugar coated. I mean, if the fear of your parents back in the day wouldn't allow you in the living room, the main television excuse was it'll burn out the tube and, you know, those kind of things. My God, imagine if the very first thing they saw was Zool. That would never be allowed in the colour TV in the living room, you know. So I don't play this as much as it deserves, I think. I think because I had played Sonic before playing this and played it to death, that I felt this was the lesser known cousin to it. It's good but not great is probably what I'm trying to get
I'd
at.
agree with that. I mean, it's a product of its time. I mean, for me, when this came out, this was a really important game because I didn't have a Mega Drive, I didn't have a Super Nintendo at this period when this came out. When did it come out? Was it 1992? Yes, so July 1992. And whilst I knew it wasn't, you know, and I'd obviously played Sonic through rental and things like that, I knew it wasn't Sonic the Hedgehog, but it was as close as you could get to
It gave you that style of game,
platformer. Console platformer. I think the sequel's a better game when we come to that, but there's a lot to love with this, and it's nice actually the redimensioned version of this, in that it does have a few additional sort of like improvement of life, subtle changes that make it, you know, a lot more easy to go back to. I love the music. This is another one by Pat Feenan as well. So, you know, he's done really well.
Yeah.
But, you know, understandably to console owners, like people who had the Mega Drive and Master System, etc., they would naturally turn their nose up at this because there was a lot more polished platform games on those platforms. But to Amiga owners, it was, you know, historically it was really important, and it's one, therefore, quite a lot of love for. It was really cute, actually, just as an aside. When I was playing this on the Amiga Mini, my granddaughter, she struggles, she's still struggling to say that many words. I don't know whether she's sort of like ahead or behind, but she's starting, amazingly, which is quite advanced, I think, starting to actually read and piece together words. And she looked at the picture, you know, like on the Amiga Mini you've got like all the box art, and she pointed it, and she must have read it, because you know, she wouldn't have heard the name, but she pointed at it and she said Zool. She wanted to play Zool, so we played it.
She was possessed in Ghostbusters. Sorry, you're getting a bit muddy. The Zool.
Oh, that's it. Zool. Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, that's probably right. But but yeah, it was quite cute. I mean, I don't think she's going to be a gamer though. She gets bored. She tries it a little bit, bashes all the buttons still, and then she's like, okay, I'm done now. But I'm doing my best to turn her into a gamer.
Good luck.
Gamer girl. Right, okay, so we go on to the sequel then.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so the sequel turned everything up to 11 on the dial. It was more of the same, but a lot more of the same. And this time you could play either Zool or you could play, was it Zeus, the female?
Something like that, yeah.
They play pretty, I mean, they had slightly different sort of power-ups and things. It's still the fantastic music of Patrick Fillon and let's say Neil Biggin is also involved.
He's got a big un.
He's got a big un. I really like Zool too. I think it's a much, it's got a lot of variety.
Yeah.
It's got, I think, better level design.
Well, it utilises the AGE graphics in the Amiga as well, isn't it? So it actually looks a lot more refined.
Yeah, if you play that version, the AGA version.
Yeah, that's the one I was always used to.
Yeah, same with me. Because I mean, this came out to 93. So at this point, I think I managed to convince my dad that he wanted to get an Amiga 1200.
Yeah. Good dad.
Because he wanted to buy like a computer. I'm like,
there's better train simulators on that, Dad.
Yeah. Which I always felt a little bit guilty because I sort of railroaded him to what I wanted rather than what I knew in my heart.
That's what kids do.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, 1993, AGA version of Zool was fantastic. CD32 version is also great. You've got wonderful wonderful music.
Yep.
CD quality music.
Yeah.
As I say, it's a wonderful soundtrack. Nice variety of levels. I think it does improve.
It's less directionless, this game. I think that's probably the biggest flaw of the other one. It feels, actually it holds its high up proudly for the Amiga in terms of, if you still want to call it a Sonic rip-off, it's far more worthy. Yeah,
it's doing its own thing. And I think a lot of that was because, like, the first... I mean, this is done by the Warp Factory. But it's still the same people, like Andy Findlay and that, who, of course, to work for EA and do things like Need for Speed The Run and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's... Yeah, I think it's really, really good. I think the Amiga... AGA version is probably the best version. I mean, there is a Jaguar version and the CD32 version. CD32 version, the music is wonderful, and it does do a few bits and bobs, like an intro and things like that. But I think the AGA version is the best one, in my opinion. As much as I love the CD music, though, I have to say. Yeah, great, just a great game, and I really wish that they did a remaster like they did the first one of the sequel. I was quite disappointed. They didn't,
because when it first came out, I was just suspecting, would see them combined, and it would be a worthwhile purchase.
Because it's like, I mean, here it is us moaning. It's like it's $7.99, isn't it, without the sale, the redimensioned one. So it's not a bad price, really. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? We moan about $7.99 for a game, but we're quite happy to go and spend £5 on a coffee or something like that.
Exactly.
Or a beer.
Exactly. what we're like.
Yeah.
At least Zool, you're not pissing it against the wall or whatever. So.
Yeah, exactly. So no, really, really good, and I certainly enjoyed my time back to it. Right, okay, so as we go on to our penultimate game.
Yes, please, yeah.
So the next two will be in the Top Gear series. So this is really, this is Top Gear 2, came out in 1993 on the SNES. The Mega Drive also saw a version. And also on the sequel, Amiga and CD32. Saw a version as well, and didn't get reviewed very well on the CD32 and the Amiga because the reviewers were just saying, it's Lotus, grumpy grump. And on the SNES and the consoles, it was quite favourably thought of. This is really, really good, I think. So like Lotus 2, this actually improves upon the original, where it's full screen if you do single player, so that's a nice addition. just plays really well. I mean, thankfully they've kept to the tracks, so it's not like Lotus 2 where it's gone checkpoint. It feels even faster. It's got more variety to the levels. It's got weather effects. It just adds everything that was great about the original and gives you more, really. I mean, what do you think of this one, the sequel?
Yeah, I've played both and compared them, and obviously, like on the Amiga with limited channels and that, then there's no engine noise over the music, whereas the SNES version, the SNES version, I suppose, in some ways, even though I'd much prefer the music on the Amiga version, I think that's still superior. I don't really like... There's nothing wrong with the SNES sound chip. I just don't like the way they started creating music on it. It's not the way I like video game chip music, that's all. But yeah, it's just another worthy racer if you like this kind of series, and an enduring series, and it gets a bit muddled with what one's Lotus and what one's not. This is a fairly decent game.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, are they getting a bit long in the tooth by this point now? Perhaps. You know what I mean? They're milking the series rather than going for anything new. I've played them all together now, and yeah, it's become a bit of a mashup, me trying to remember what happened in what game now, because there's only so much you can do with these type of driving games, isn't there? Of this type. But that's not a bad thing. It just depends. It might be a new audience member for this game that's never played the games prior. They're a bit newer to the SNES or whatever. So yeah, I just think it's that they're flogging a dead horse a little bit now by this stage. I think that's the issue. But we're not finished yet. We're still moving on to the third one, But
which actually I quite like the third one when we come to it. But no, yeah. I thought this it's got nice variety. I really liked it in that it was like discovering another Lotus game.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And it's nice that it's full screen. It's addictive gameplay. I love the fact that I much prefer, as I say, it's positional racing. It's just great. I've got first place. It does involve a lot of races to get enough money to like upgrade your engines and things like that. Yeah, but overall, I thought it's really, really solid. And the music of Pat Phelan again was really, really good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a lot of... I enjoyed my time with this one, basically. Good. But I will say, actually, when we go on to the next one, I thought this was the best in the series, actually. Maybe it's something about the 3. maybe it's something about the 3rd in the series. Right, okay, so the final game we're officially going to cover, and there will be one honourable mention, because people will spit their feathers out, but I'll explain why we didn't cover it, was Top Gear 3000. Now, this came out quite late on the SNES. It came out in 1994, so the world was beginning to look to the next generation. Now, I should add, this was the last Top Gear game that Gremlin itself had involvement with. There were lots of Top Gear games that went on to like N64 and PlayStation 2. They, apart from the name, they had nothing to do with Gremlin, which I think showed a lot in the games. But I quite like what they did with Top Gear 3000 because they decided this is the one that goes to space, basically. So a lot of the tracks look Earth-like, if honest, but you're basically going from planet to planet. But it's kind of nice that you are in, you see things like double moons and things like that, or things in the background. But what's nice as well, and one thing I really like with this is, unlike the reliance on the the prequels, where you have to like go into the pit stop to refuel, which I don't like. This has more an F-Zero vibe, where there's 3D. You've basically got sections of the track you drive over to recharge your fuel or damage to the car. And I like that because it doesn't slow down the action. Another thing that's really cool with this version as well is you get nitros and things you pick up, coins you pick up, which is on the track. There's jumps, really nice. One of the things that I really like with this is also you can play 4-player. That's a big deal if you think on the SNES, being able to split between 4 players. I thought it was a really clever inclusion. So at least they were trying to really sort of like up the game.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it breathes fresh air into the series. I think it's a very worthy game now. Obviously in this one, they used an equivalent chip, a bit like Star Fox's Super Effects chip. This used DSP chip in it as well that gives it a graphical overhaul, and you can see that the game doesn't quite look like traditional SNES games, does it? Or,
it's definitely fast.
Or whatnot. So it gives it just that extra oomph. I feel it runs faster. I think the cars have a more 3D feel to them as well. And I love the little cutscenes of the spaceship that's transporting your car to the different planets in the solar system. It looks beautiful. It's a really
going into space
genuine game. Yeah, it's about as preposterous now as the Fast and the Furious series has become. In space. But it's tongue in cheek. That I mean, the racing on the moon or the Mars-like red planet. There's lots of great graphical touches. There's one where you're driving through a tunnel and there's just a crack in the cave where you see the horizon in the distance. Of course, there's a foggy planet. There's got to be other foggy planets elsewhere. But there's nice graphical touches on the cars in that fog. They go a bit blurry and a bit ghost-like. They don't just appear out of the blue in the draw distance. There's a nice sort of translucent effect happening on them. It's absolutely fantastic. I think this is a real hidden gem, this one, that I don't...
Yeah, because I think, given how late it was on the SNES life, I think a lot of people will have sort of like looked the other way with this one. And also, it only came out on the SNES, whereas like the others, saw it on the Amiga and that. This only came out on the SNES, so... Yeah, I was blown away by the entire Top Gear series. For me, I guess, because I chose this list predominantly, like you chose the 8-bit section. I knew obviously a lot of these games, but the Top Gear was a genuine surprise because although I knew we needed to include them, I'd not really spent any proper time with them, and this really opened my eyes, and it was a big highlight for me. So there's only one game we have to give a quick honourable mention to, purely because it is fondly loved, but I didn't feel that you or I
are qualified to
talk about it. It is, of course, the Premier Manager series. It's a football management sim. I think it's well known that Kingy and me, apart from Football Manager on the Spectrum, haven't got much of love for football, and particularly football where you're not even, it's all boring imagery.
Exactly.
I would say this is a bit like Championship Manager with better graphics. I don't know. I mean, what can you say with it? I mean, when I had a quick go, it just looked lots of different, admittedly a lot prettier than Championship Manager screens and things, but I got nothing really. It would be unfair for me to give my opinions on it because it did nothing for me personally, but that's on me really.
Yeah.
Have you got any thoughts on it?
I absolutely despise football, mate. That it would just be unfair. It just does that. Would do nothing. Looking at statistics of a football match. Oh, please not. No,
I think, but I felt it was important we just gave a little nod to it because, if to a lot of people, if you talked about your favourite Gremlin games of this period, that might appear on some people's lists. People who love.
Of course, absolutely, and I understand that.
So I just wanted, we hadn't forgot it. It was purposeful that we left it off a list.
Yeah.
So that's all the games, and I think overall it shows what a wonderful, rich period Gremlin were in this period, and it's amazing, isn't it? There's not many developers particularly when we come to like the third one, where there's some amazing games down the road that we're going to cover. There's not many developers that survive so well. You know, either they were brilliant on the 8-bit and then they sort of waned in the 16-bit.
Yeah.
Or they specialised in one period, like, you know, just the 16-bit period. There's not many publishers or developers that succeeded through even, and you could argue even to today, because Sumo Digital is really Gremlin all but name, and obviously they did the Infogram period.
Yeah.
But overall, from your point of view, going through the games, was there any particular highlights? I know you've sort of flagged them as we got along, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Pegasus stood out for me as because it was fresh, and you know, falling more in love with Switchblade 1 came as a surprise to me, because same with you, 2 shines so much, but I just gave it a bit more time and persistence and got a lot out of it. So they'd be the standout ones for me. Of course, the Lotus games will always be fond in your heart.
Oh yeah, we're not saying the best. We're just saying ones were a surprise.
Yeah, but they're the surprises for me. And I find, you know, I mean, Harlequin, I love and adore. And it brings, that's the one that pulls the nostalgic strings on me, tugs the heart that way stronger than any other game, just simply because it's a platform game. But I think overall, out of that was 20 games and that one honourable mention, I think it's a very strong list and does show the business sense of Gremlin in that way, and quality titles there that sold well for them, enough to survive into the next period of gaming.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I knew it was a lot of games, but ultimately, yeah, we just had to cover them.
You did,
hence was the quality.
Yeah.
For me, the big takeaway was the Top Gear
Good.
games, like I mentioned, particularly 3000. I think they're brilliant, all brilliant games. And yeah, probably like you with Switchblade 1, falling in love with that a bit more, because that's, you know, I always had left it really.
Yeah.
Because I had the fond memories of Switchblade 2. So, but like you, once you get used to that annoying build up your attack, you know, have to hold the fire button.
You get used to that,
You get used to it. It's actually really, really fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so fantastic. Well, I know it's been a long episode for everybody, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. And we'd love, as always, you know, please try some of these games. You know, we do see it as a almost like a gaming club, isn't it? Where it's not just about us, but it's us talking with our listeners and say, hey, try this, and we'd love, you know, people discovering with us some of these games and interacting with the podcast. So please give them a try, and you know, on Discord, let us know what you think and your views. Anything else you want to shout out before we?
No, I am good, thank you. I am going to hop off before my wife lynches me, as usual when I do an episode with you.
I have a feeling I'm going to be, if ever you get divorce papers, I'm going to be mentioned in the divorce papers. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's good.
I'm sorry,
All is
Kitty.
good.
Lovely. Anyway, boys and girls, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you try some of these games and reach out to us and tell us what you think. As always, we'd love to hear.
Indeed.
So until next time, keep it retro.
Bye bye.